My husband is cheating on me with my best friend, betraying both our marriage and my trust in the most painful way. I'm honestly not sure where to start, so I guess I'll just start. My husband and I have been dating since I was 19 and he was 22. We've been married for 6 years now. We have 2 kids and I'm 6 months pregnant with our third. 2 years ago I found out my dad has stage 3 colon cancer. My dad is my only parent as my mom passed away when I was 12. He's my favorite human and life without him doesn't seem as colorful. His laugh is contagious and he gives these big bear hugs that seem to make all of your broken pieces feel like they're perfectly in place again. Whenever I've had a hard day he doesn't poke and prod and just lets me vent and listens. About 5 months ago we discovered the treatments aren't working for him and in direct quote from the doctor he said months not years. Since then he's gotten progressively worse and now is losing memory. He looked at the dog he got for me on my 21st birthday and said, "Wow, that's a nice dog. Where'd you get it?" My husband has been my absolute rock. He has been there for me holding my hand and helping me through this. He's been so loving and attentive to both my kids and I. Don't get me wrong, I am a mother first always. I don't allow myself to wallow. My kids are still loved, cared for, played with, and I haven't let my load slack around the house. Once my dad got his updated prognosis, my husband encouraged me to quit my job. About a month later we discovered we were pregnant again and I still hadn't let go of my job. I kept holding out for some reason. After finding out I was pregnant again he assured me it was still okay to quit my job, that honestly it would save us a small fortune on daycare costs anyways. So I did, I quit my job. My best friend and I have been friends since diapers. Her family is like my family and vice versa. My mom and her mom grew up together. We've always been solid and right after my dad's appointment when we found out he had so little time left I drove straight to her house and she held me while I cried for hours. If there are soulmates in friend form, she was mine. Thick as thieves, is what my mom used to say. This morning as I was up with my 3-year-old, he's sick, my husband's work alarm was going off. He has a few he sets so I turned that one off and gently woke him up. He said he was up late working so he took the morning off. Rolled over and went back to sleep. As I went to turn off the remainder of his alarms I saw a text from my friend on his lock screen that said, "I'm assuming since there hasn't been an angry pregnant lady on my doorstep you haven't told her about us yet?" Time froze at that moment. I took his phone and walked away and just read their conversations. 4 months this man has been fucking my best friend. 4 months these people have been lying to my face. And I know what you're going to say, you should have seen the warning signs. But I've been clutching this phone in my hand for 2 hours and nothing. He has been so loving and attentive to me, but he always has been. So kind and gentle. There have been no late night work nights except for once in a blue moon, there has been no lingering touches between them or even glances. They act as they have since the day I first introduced them. How sick is it that she calls him her brother but she screws him? I know so many people get a moment of clarity in situations like this but I have none. Aside from being sad about my dad, I haven't changed. I'm still a loving wife and mother. I still doted on him and my children. I talk to him about how he is doing and how his day is every freaking day. I haven't allowed the ground to swallow me whole. I know what I have to do now, but I just don't want to. I'm about to lose my family and my support system in one blow. I'll confront him tomorrow. Today I just need this last 24 hours of peace. As for her, I won't give her the satisfaction of a response. I don't care why she did it. She did it and it's done. I was always the friend who cleaned up her messes. After today I will cut her out of my life like she never mattered at all. This has to be the hardest storm I'll ever weather, but damn it I know it'll sail through it. If not for me, for my children. Update 1. A small update about everything going on since my kids are now in bed for the night. I spent the morning gathering everything I could and making a checklist. I sat in my office for the better part of the morning telling my husband that I was preparing things for my dad. Not a total lie. I did have to get him sorted with hospice today. My boss would be happy to have me back, however my lawyer said pump the brakes on that idea for the time being. However my old boss did tell me that whenever I'm ready, the door is open and to just give her a call. He does not have access to my inheritance from my father, nor my mother. My lawyer assured me that. I didn't mention her in the post but my mother-in-law is an absolute angel. I love and adore her so much and she's always been a shoulder to lean on. After he had gone to work for the afternoon I asked my now ex-best friend's mom and my mother-in-law to meet me at my dad's house. My kids were outside playing with my now ex-BFF's older brother. I just handed them the screenshots, saving them from the unsavory pictures and sex tape, though I did tell them it existed. To say they were furious was an understatement, and they are on my side completely. Angie, my now ex-BFF's mom, is ready to cut contact with her daughter completely. She kept repeating how sorry she was. We hugged and cried together. My mother-in-law told me she couldn't believe she raised a spineless, terrible human. That no matter what happens I will always have her, and as far as she's concerned she doesn't have a son, only a daughter. After an in-person meeting with my lawyer we went over finances, logistics, and everything you could think of. She has all of the proof and she's out for blood. With this post now on TikTok I don't want him to find out by an app, because one look at the story and he'd know it was about him. With permission from my lawyer. My ex-BFF, her mom and dad, my soon-to-be ex and his parents will be having a get-together tomorrow. By the time they're sitting down and showing them everything and that I know. My dad, my kids and my ex-BFF's brother, he's coming to help me juggle the kids, and my dad, being big and pregnant doesn't help with mobility, will be at my dad's cabin a few hours away enjoying time and space. I know a lot of people were hoping for me to get revenge or do psychological warfare, but honestly after my kids went to bed I took a shower and just broke. I don't have the strength or energy to dish anything out. I just want out. Pretending like everything was okay today was too exhausting and I just don't want to do it. Once he finds out tomorrow I'll update with the aftermath, as I'm sure it will be huge. As for now, thank you all so much for your kindness, warmth and support. Truly. Your words have helped give me the strength to keep my head above water. I appreciate every single last one of you for everything. Update 2. For my typing's sake, I'm going to give everyone fake names, so for context, mother-in-law and father-in-law, Ruth and Joe ex-best friend forever parents. Angie and Bob ex-best friend forever. Jess soon to be ex-Tyler. Ex-best friends forever brother, Jake. And I'll just refer to my dad as Dad. I have a few things I want to get through, so I'll just summarize as best as I can, and if you have any questions I'll answer in the comments. To get this out of the way, because to me it feels important. Yesterday I scheduled a same-day appointment with my obstetrician gynecologist and got tested for just about every STD/STI out there. I got the results back and they were all negative. There's a few that take up to 2 weeks to get the results back for, so I'll be waiting on those. When I met with my lawyer I bought everything on my end financially wise, including the wills from both my dad and my mom, and I managed to get my hands on his financial documents. He stores his in his office in a locked box. I also brought over everything we had set up financially for my children. While I'm not totally sure if it's everything, I'm pretty confident I got most of it. My lawyer was happy I managed to get my hands on that much. Ruth even handed over her will to me from both her and Bob to ensure I was taken care of in the divorce. My lawyer understands I am wanting a divorce immediately. However, she wants to make sure she is thorough and isn't missing any key info. So hopefully I'll have actual divorce papers to give him in about 30 days. I'm not rushing her though, I'm letting the professional do her job. Now for the sit down. I asked Angie and Ruth to describe everything in detail on what happened. Angie, the revenge seeker that she is, forced them to sit through a slideshow she put together of all of the texts. I know a lot of you were concerned about one of them telling them sooner than later, but they were so secretive they didn't even tell their significant others about what was happening. Once the slideshow ended, Tyler tried lunging for Jess and Joe actually had to force him to sit down. Tyler was shouting profanities at Jess and telling her she will regret this. Jess started crying and begging her parents for forgiveness. Bob looked his daughter in the eye and told her he will never forgive her for this. Blood or not, she is no daughter of his. He didn't raise his daughter to be this person. Jess was always a daddy's girl, so I think that cut her pretty deep. Jess is in the middle of a divorce herself and her parents were giving her money for her lawyer and they told her she is cut off from them both financially and physically. Tyler's dad was irate. According to Ruth, he looked like he was holding back on throttling him. From there Tyler went straight home. I know because we have a Ring doorbell camera along with a few cameras in the house for our kids to keep an eye on them when we aren't right next to them. Tyler came home and saw that most of mine and the kids' stuff was gone and he lost it. Started yelling and throwing things. The house is now trashed with a few holes in the walls for decoration. When he didn't find us there, he went to my dad's. While I did spend most of the day, he was at work packing and moving things into my dad's house. We were already at his cabin. Tyler took a baseball bat to my dad's door trying, and failing, to break it down. My dad's neighbor actually called the cops on him and he was arrested. His parents refused to bail him out. I had an appointment with my therapist today. I've had one for a year now since I was struggling with my dad, and it felt good to just cry it out and let everything out about how I was feeling. It was very helpful and she gave me a few tools to work through my emotions with this one. I felt very grounded and empowered leaving my session today. I'm also planning on setting up my children with a therapist when we get back from the cabin to figure out the best way to deal with telling them. I know people said I shouldn't, but I will be telling them, just in an age-appropriate way. I don't want there to be secrets and lies between us. I've always been as open and honest as I can with them, again in the most kid-appropriate way. Just because they're small humans, they're still humans and still deserve the truth. I had a handful of comments telling me I should stay and every man cheats. I should work things out because most of our marriage was good. I refuse to believe all men cheat. My parents were married for 20 years and after my mom passed my dad never moved on. I watched my dad love my mom for 12 of those years and cherish her. I will not accept anything less than that kind of love. He never cheated nor did she. While I'm not sure when I'll be ready to move on, falling in love is the absolute last thing on my mind at the moment. I refuse to let Tyler win and destroy love for me completely. I will move on from this. Jess started blowing up my phone demanding I fix this situation and immediately blaming me. My lawyer told me to not block texts just in case they spill out additional info I was missing. She was playing the poor me card very hard. The thing is though, I never influenced Angie and Bob to cut contact with their daughter, they made that choice on their own. She actually started blaming me for stealing the love of her life. I introduced them when Tyler and I started dating, so not sure where that came from, and that Tyler is only with me for the kids. Honestly, I knew she was just trying to hurt me at that point. I didn't give her the satisfaction of responding though. Between her and Tyler I have about 200 missed calls. Tyler went from begging and pleading me to forgive him. Like I said, I didn't have divorce papers to hand him, so he's stuck in this unknown gray area. I also asked Angie and Ruth to not say anything about the divorce to him yet. Purely just for my satisfaction, honestly. I know it's slightly petty, but keeping him in that gray area of not knowing is my small revenge to him. To threatening to call the cops on me for kidnapping, telling me Jess wasn't the only one, bingo, just what I was looking for, to telling me I'm a stuck-up bitch, to threatening me, to back to begging me for forgiveness. Honestly, it was just a whiplash reading those texts. I'd be lying if I said that those texts didn't hurt me and terrify me all at once, but I refuse to let them break me. As for both of them together, I don't think he's going to stay with her. I think he blames her for blowing up our marriage, honestly. Who knows though, they deserve each other. I was initially okay to do a 50-50th split with Tyler for custody, but after his reaction I don't feel comfortable with that, so I'll likely be going for full custody. Jake has about 30 days of leave he's saved up and he's going to be using them to help the kids and I get settled at my dad's house, and honestly to be there in case Tyler tries showing up going crazy again. He's been such a big help to the kids and I lately, and I'm forever in his debt for this. Last night after the kids went to bed he hooked up his Xbox and we played a game called Diablo 4 together to help me take my mind off of things. It was fun. However, he did sort of confess that he's always had feelings for me somewhere in the midst of things, but also told me to not say or do anything back. He understands a relationship or anything like that isn't on my mind and won't be for a while. He isn't wrong, but just that he's felt that way since we were teenagers and just wanted to get it off his chest. Thank you again. Seriously, your comments, your support, your messages, all of it has been one giant breath of fresh air. Just knowing I have a whole online community willing to go to bat for me has kept me treading water these last couple days. Your comments have popped in my head when I felt like just giving up on leaving him because it's so hard, and gave me so many great points and helpful advice. I know I deserve more and I can't accept his actions. And to the people who commented relating to my situation, my heart goes out to you all. This pain is awful and I hate that so many of you can relate, but your stories have resonated deep within me. You all keep commending me for my strength, and my personal favorite is telling me how proud of me you are. Every time I see those words I start to tear up. I'm blaming the pregnancy hormones, but your words have helped put me at ease so that way I could do what I knew I needed to do. So I'll leave this here for now. If anything of importance happens when I go back home I'll update further. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Questions in the comments. Hobbit Bones. I'm sure many of us would like to know, have you told your lawyer that you want to go for full custody? And have you saved those messages your soon-to-be ex said with threats toward you and your children? I'm sure you have, since you saved screenshots of messages the first time. You've handled this really well. You've done all the right things to gather evidence and protect yourself. I'm proud of you. And I really wish the best for you and your children. OP answer. I forwarded everything to her as well as telling her he was arrested, and she responded with, full custody. And I agreed. Thank you, truly so much. A comment deleted after an overwhelming number of downvotes faulted OP for taking her kid's father away from them. To this OP replied, I'm not taking away their father. I will not keep them from him at all. But yes, I will most likely go for full custody. Not out of bitterness or spite, because I could simply never be that person. There is zero excuse for punching holes in walls, and trying to break down my dad's door, threatening to unalive me, Unalive our children. If he wants to see them, I will allow supervised visits. Maybe in the future, if he gets therapy and help for those thoughts and actions, I'll allow it. For now, my mind is made up. You may see it as running away, but I see it as taking space to comprehend what has happened to my life and allow myself breathing room. My entire future I had carved out for myself and my children has exploded right in front of my face. That deserves breathing room. And yes, I allowed others to confront what they did to me, simply because I don't have the mental capacity. My focus is on my kids and my dad, everything else is background noise. Honestly, even if I did confront them myself, my in-laws and ex-friends' parents would have had their own confrontation regardless. I am fully aware I will have to face the music one day. However, today is not that day and I plan on enjoying that for the time being. People doubted if OP's story was true as the break between updates was quite short, with comments like, "All this in 1 day and a half." To which OP replied, "My doctor's appointment took an hour at max, most OBs do same-day appointments for urgent reasons. I just moved clothing, some toys and any of my important things to my dad's, which is 15 minutes away from my home with help from quite a few people. To be honest, it wasn't even a lot of stuff to move anyways. It all fit in the bed of my father-in-law's pickup. I was lucky that a lawyer had a same-day opening spot and gathered documents that are all stored in one spot because I keep them organized. I already have weekly virtual therapy sessions, which just so happened to be today, which was an hour. All I did was give my in-laws and ex-BFF's parents the screenshots and saw them for about 2 hours before I headed home. Which I usually spend time with my dad in the evenings, so he was fully aware of where I was, but I asked him to stay home and start dinner instead of coming and drive to a cabin. I found out yesterday around 6-7 a.m. Do people not understand how little actually happened? Jess, I was hoping it wasn't you when I saw this on TikTok, but obviously it is you, Kirsten. I told you to break up with him. I told you Tobias was in love with me. You refused to listen. I told you my husband left me because he was cheating, but it was because Toby told me we could run away together and we could be together. You ruined everything and now he won't speak to me. You need to clean your mess up instead of posting on socials being a pathetic POS. You're unbelievable. Did you think I wouldn't see this and find out? I hope you miscarry. Technical_pumpkin_65s, also somebody in OP's life, reply to Jess? Are you serious, Jade? Apparently Jess's real name. Coming here and playing the victim, you disgusting fake human being. Not only that, but you expose yourself by telling the real names. Now everyone will know it's you and your entourage. You are so jealous and have a huge obsession with Kirsten that you ruined your own life after all the mess you created. It's obvious Toby never loved you but just wanted to use you for his pleasure. There is nothing more easier to manipulate than a jealous freak who has an obsession with him. If he really wanted to run away with you, he would have done it a long time ago, but he lied to your face with the one big excuse ever, "I stay for the kids." Ha ha ha, you are the clown. Well, **** here, not victim. That's why even your own parents cut you out from their lives too. You are such a shame as a woman, but also as a human being. You pretend to befriend and betray not only her but your family and your own husband. Can't wait to hear what will happen to you when more people will know around you. You will finally receive the treatment you deserve, especially after wishing her to lose her baby. Karma will do his job now. OP's reply to Jess: you told me to break up with him when I was 19 and you were engaged to another man. You never said why. You never said anything about him, because if you did I never would have been married and you would have been cut out sooner. Also, no, I put fake names in the post to protect your identities, but if you want to blast yourself to the public, that's your choice, not mine. Update 3. Hi everyone. I know a lot of people are still asking for an update. Not much has happened, but here are the things that have happened. Tyler discovered the post and asked me if I was seeking a divorce. I said I was. He apologized for losing his cool. Asked if there was any hope for reconciliation. I said no. We did have a conversation about the kids, and he'll be allowed to see them with supervision, to which he agreed to. I had another meeting with my lawyer. Nothing of major importance happened. Nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, has happened with Jake. He didn't take back his confession, but as I said, it's on the back burner for a long while. My kids' health and well-being take priority over all else. My dad's health is on a steady decline. He's now in the hospital with no release date in the immediate future. Please send over thoughts and well wishes his way. My kids are adjusting well. We have a therapy appointment for them scheduled next week to help them. My oldest has more questions than the rest, but I'm trying to save any big conversations for the therapy appointment, so I know I'm conveying the answers in a meaningful and the least harmful way. Also, my oldest made tryouts for the traveling soccer league. Yay. Oh, and the baby is doing great. Things have calmed down a lot. Truly. I feel like I have a better grip on things. I've been putting most of my focus on my dad and kids to keep myself busy. Thanks you friends for the love, support, and for checking in new update. Hey everyone! I'm still getting daily messages and comments for an update, so here is what could possibly be my final one. My dad passed away about a week after my last update. I knew it was coming, but it still feels like a gut punch. Thank you to everyone who kept him in your thoughts. Truly. My marriage has officially ended. Once Tyler, I believe that's the fake name I assigned to him, please don't call me out if it's not, it's been a while, discovered just how serious I was about leaving him, he became compliant and was willing to give me everything I asked for in the divorce. So my lawyer opted for a dissolution versus divorce. The process is a lot quicker and goes smoothly. As of right now I have full custody while he works out his anger management and whatnot with therapy. I'm not sure if I'll ever trust him again with the kids, but I'm also in therapy as are my kids. I'm not making any decisions at all right now when it comes to that. He gets supervised visits at a facility where there is an army of staff and security and someone is there at all times. That's once a week, and he does get video calls twice a week. The kids are adjusting pretty well. There are days when I think it affects them more, but they've suffered some big losses, so it's to be expected. I did decide to give the baby my dad's first name though. It just felt right. But the baby is doing so very well and is thriving despite the amount of stress I've had going on. I'm managing as best as I can with everything going on. I miss my dad like crazy and I'm still trying to figure out how to exist in a world where he doesn't. The grief still is so very heavy. I'm still mourning my marriage as well. I don't regret leaving him, but it still hurts me deeply. However, I'm picking up the pieces and making my life whole without him. My mother-in-law, well ex-mill now I guess. I don't know, it still feels weird. And Angie helped me out so much. They've really allowed me to lean on them in these moments. Whether it be taking the kids for a little while or cooking dinner for us when I don't have the energy. I truly am so lucky to have them. And finally to what you all have been waiting to hear about, Jake. Jake is now back in California. He tried extending his leave but the military said no. It was truly wonderful having him there and helping me. In the first few days after my dad's passing he picked up so much slack for me that I will truly never be able to repay him for it. He is so patient and kind. That being said, nothing has happened between us. Though he did hold me while I broke down after the kids went to bed quite a few times. But that's the extent of it. No kissing or anything like that. He does call me and text me multiple times a day. Right now I just don't have any room in my life for romance. I have so much grief and the weight of being a single mom has been heavy. He hasn't pushed me on it either. He let me know that he meant every word he said and that he's willing to just be my friend until I decide I want more, if I ever decide I want more with him. I wish I could be the girl that jumps in with both feet, but the betrayal from my ex is still fresh and I'm worried I would burn anything out before it started. So I asked for friends and time to process everything else in my life before I even consider processing a new relationship. He happily agreed. Oh, and Tyler and Jess are not a couple. Most of you were right, he left her high and dry. Though I don't wish misery on anyone, I'd be lying if I didn't say I get the smallest amount of satisfaction that her life went up in smoke. She's been blacklisted from her family. And I know a lot of you said it's weird that her parents did that, but if you guys knew just how deep my bond went with that family it wouldn't seem weird at all. Angie is like my surrogate mom. She gave me the safe sex talk, the period talk, she listened to me cry about the boys who broke my heart, she held my hand while I delivered my kids. When she talks about me she calls me her daughter. She knew my mom for practically her whole life. She held my mom's hand when she delivered me and if anything had happened to both of my parents, she's who I would have gone to live with, my parents had that in their will. So with all of that being said, please just be kind to me in the comments. I put this off for a few days because of how hostile some people were and the prospect of being called a liar doesn't sound too appealing at the moment. Again, I can't thank you for the amount of light and love I've received from you. I promise I read every comment and message, I just haven't had the capacity to respond. You have really helped brighten my days with all of your words of encouragement. I appreciate you all. I am so lucky to have an army of internet friends, you guys are the best. My boyfriend says coming in me is a boundary. What should I do? First of all, thank you all for the support. I tried to read almost every message and comment but there were a lot so it's hard. Some of you thought I was super naive and I feel like I needed to just hear the truth straight up and after posting and reading I decided to end it pretty quickly. Just for some context, our relationship other than this situation honestly hasn't been great either. We're different races and his parents don't accept me. He has strict Asian parents. He's extremely childish and immature, spends all day playing video games and we do honestly constantly argue, The only thing that was good about our relationship was the sex part, and now that that's gone because of how he's acting, there's truly nothing good left in it. The plan was to break up with him as soon as he got home from work, and of course, today was the day that he was staying late at his job, and I just wanted to get things done and over with because it was eating me up inside. When he finally got home, he just ignored me, and part of me just wanted to ignore him back and not deal with it, but I knew what needed to be done. So I went to our room where he had been since he got off work. He was playing video games, and I told him that we needed to talk, which he rolled his eyes at. You guys said to be as direct as possible, so I told him that I was breaking up with him because he's manipulative and childish. Immediately you could see the change in his face from smug to scared. He asked if I was seriously gonna throw everything away because of a disagreement, and I told him it was bigger than that. He said if I wanted to leave him because I can't fulfill his needs, then to go right ahead. So I turned around to leave, and he said, wait. This is where I lost it. All the last months boiled over, and I said how manipulative and disgusting he was, all because he couldn't come in me for a little while. That he was a child, and if he couldn't figure out how wrong he was at 26, then there was no fixing him. I also told him how pathetic he was for putting on such a show by crying while watching porn just to try to make me feel bad. He said it wasn't a show, he just was upset that we were fighting all the time and he happened to be watching porn. He also doubled down by saying that coming in his woman is important, and brought up his boundaries again. And I told him how much bullshit that is and that he can't set boundaries on my body. We were both crying a lot. He then admitted that he acted this way to deter me from taking out my IUD. After that, I left to go to my parents' house, and he's tried calling and texting, all apologetic now, but I don't feel the need to ever talk to him again. Now to the next story, story 2. I just discovered my husband has been telling his coworkers I'm his sister. What should I do? I need advice. Throwaway account because I don't use or understand Reddit, but I really need advice from someone not connected to me or my husband. My husband, I'll call him Josh, and I have been together for 6 years, married for 4, and we don't have kids. We have a really healthy and communicative relationship. We're both pretty easygoing, and I really love him. He started working at a large accounting firm about 3 years ago, and from what he tells me, he loves it there. He's made a lot of friends through his job, and he goes out with them for drinks and social events quite often, and I've been totally okay with that. I'm quite introverted, so I've never been interested in meeting his colleagues or work friends, nor have I asked to. I've got my own circle of friends, and I'm fine with us having separate friend groups. After what happened yesterday, it only just occurred to me that he has never actually asked me if I'd like to meet any of them, or go to one of his work events. I guess that's important context. Anyway, I'll start with what happened a few months ago, that I had brushed off until now. I was at a bar with some friends for a couple of Friday after work drinks, and a guy approached me. He was there with some friends too. He looked slightly familiar, but I hadn't met him before. He seemed friendly enough, and he asked me, my name, right? I think I must have just given him a confused look, because he followed up with, I'm Jake, I work with Josh. I realized that I recognized him from some photos on my husband's phone. I don't use social media except for a private Instagram, so I'm not sure if he posted the photos anywhere, but we've got a very trusting relationship, so I look in his photos sometimes. Don't hate me. This is where it gets a bit embarrassing. I'm a bit socially awkward, and so I struggled to end the conversation, but he just kept talking at me. I guess he was already a couple of beers deep. But while he was talking, he said something like, it's great that you guys are still so close. I haven't talked to my brother in ages. At the time I was like, huh? But I just assumed he was drunk and not making sense, so I ignored it. He started to get a little flirty, so I turned to my friends and we left shortly after that. I didn't say anything to them about it, and it didn't seem like a big deal to me. I also decided not to tell my husband that I had met his coworker Jake. Not to hide it, but because I figured the guy wouldn't even remember talking to me, and I didn't want to make it awkward for Josh at work by telling him his colleague tried to hit on me. I just thought no harm, no foul. But yesterday morning, I was out walking our dog, Monty. He's a cross between a few breeds and has very unique markings. This matters, I promise. And was on my way to my regular cafe, which is in town. I was waiting in line to order, and the guy in front was an older man. He got his coffee and turned around, but stopped and looked at my dog and goes, hello Monty. Monty was super excited to see him, apparently, and so I guessed that the guy was another colleague of Josh's, because Josh brings the dog to the office a couple of times a week. I thought it was sweet, to be honest, so I smiled at him and said hi. He introduced himself. I guessed correctly that he was a colleague, but then he said something like, aren't you a good sister, walking his dog for him. I was so confused that I didn't even know how to react at first, so I stumbled on my words and just said, it's my dog. I regret it, but I genuinely couldn't bring myself to correct him and say that I'm Josh's wife and not his sister. It was just too awkward, and I just wanted to leave because I think was suddenly dawning on me what might have been going on. He asked me something about sharing a dog, but I was able to escape the conversation by being next in line to order my coffee, and he left. I seriously don't know what to do, because what the fuck? Do I even ask my husband about this? Part of me is just assuming or hoping that it's a mistake, that he doesn't talk about me much at work and they assume we are related because we both have brown hair. But the thought that he has been telling his coworkers that I'm his sister, and evidently they have seen what I look like, so they must have seen photos, makes my stomach churn. I don't even know how I would broach the subject with him. I need some help. What would you guys do in this situation? I have only told one friend what happened because it's so weird and embarrassing, and she has jumped straight to time to plot his downfall. Because she's my ride or die, love her, but I don't want to immediately assume the worst, or ruin my marriage over something that could be nothing. I'm sorry for the long and rambly post, but I would really appreciate any and all advice. Edit, holy fuck. Thank you everyone who commented with some advice. I haven't read all of them, but I really appreciate the suggestions from you guys. A small update, Josh came home at about 2:30 a.m. last night, but he was drunk so he just went straight to sleep, which is fine by me because fuck having this conversation in that state. I've just woken up but he's still sleeping. First thing I just want to clear up. I've seen a lot of people suggesting I have crippling social anxiety, or am severely introverted, which I suppose you could glean from the way I explained what happened, but I'm not. I meant that I'm slightly introverted and that I'm not the most eager to meet lots of new people at once, especially a bunch of finance bros whose weekends consist of unending sports bar beers, where I assume I would be mansplained everything until my ears bleed. Prob a negative assumption, but I'm sure some of you know what I mean. I suppose you could say that I'm confrontation averse, in that I'm quite laid back and prefer to keep a conversation easy and positive. IDK. I don't like it when things are awkward, and correcting when people misrecognize me is one of those things, but I'm not terrified of confrontation. Also, my husband and I do share some mutual friends. I didn't explain that well, but our lives are not entirely separate. The way he acts towards me around our mutual friends is extremely affectionate and normal. It is only his work friends that I have never interacted with. I've also seen some people suggest that what is going on is equivalent to my husband beating me and me hopelessly wondering whether I should break up with him. Or that I'm stupid for thinking my relationship was healthy when it clearly isn't. Like, damn, cut me some slack. I'm a real person and this is an entirely alien and bizarre situation for me. My first reaction wasn't to assume the worst, but I do appreciate that you all have made me certain that it is a big deal. I guess I needed confirmation that the things that happened are enough proof that Josh has been purposefully lying, and they weren't just mix-ups. I'm going to talk to him today and ask him directly why he's telling his coworkers that I'm his sister. I followed the advice of writing my points down so that they don't get lost if I get emotional, lol. I will do my best not to let him slither out of it, and I hope he has some proof that his colleagues know I'm his wife. I know that's not the theatrical confrontation you guys were hoping for, but it's a Saturday, and I can't wait. Wish me luck, thank you all. Update 1. Hi everyone, I just wanted to say thank you for overwhelming amount of support and advice. I'm blown away and it really means a lot and has kept me grounded. I'm sorry for the slow update. I know a lot of you were interested in what happened. I actually tried to update on Saturday, but it turns out this subreddit doesn't allow me to post an update until 48 hours after my first post. I'm also only allowed to post one single update, so I'll try to fit as much as I can here. Sorry for how long it might end up getting. I'll just get right into it. On Saturday morning I woke up earlier than my husband. He was very hungover, so he was like sleeping a rock. But you guys will be proud of me, because I followed some advice and decided to look through his phone properly while he was sleeping. I have been on his phone so often just pissing around on it that I had never thought to check anything very deeply. I know his passcode by heart. I checked all the expected things like Instagram DMs, Facebook Messenger, his iMessages, etc., and I didn't find anything that set off alarm bells to me. But I know from some comments that people who are cheating are good at covering their tracks and hiding messages, so I kept looking around. I saw he had a folder called Work, and so I looked in there, and he had a couple of Microsoft apps, Outlook, Authenticator, OneNote, etc., but he also had MS Teams. So I opened that up and had a look around. It did feel like I might have been breaking laws looking at his work messages, but I obviously had to. Anyway, I was already upset to see that he had a bunch of one-on-one chats with several female coworkers. Which, at first glance, is obviously not an issue, because everyone works with people of the opposite gender and are required to communicate with them. But a couple of them were vaguely flirty. Nothing I would call egregious, but there would be the occasional message between them with some playful innuendo or a wink emoji. These upset me, obviously, and they did send me into a bit of a spiral, but I didn't find anything that suggested he was having an out-and-out affair with any of them. Still, I followed someone's suggestion of screenshotting the messages and I airdropped them to myself. I still wanted some evidence of the lie though. Some proof of Josh telling someone that I was his sister directly. A commenter suggested that I go through his messages and search for keyword sister. I wanted to reply to your comment and say thank you for the idea, but the post was locked, so I couldn't, but thank you. So I searched for sis on his MS Teams, hoping to find results for both sister and sis. A bunch of messages from all hands group chats or one-on-one chats came up from other people, all unrelated and about their own sisters or whatever. But my heart dropped out my ass LOL, when I saw there was a direct message from Jake, the guy from the bar, to Josh from a Monday a few months ago. Jake's messages said, "Ran into your sis at the bar on Fry. She's single, right?" And my husband had the fucking gall to reply, "Nah, she's married." I literally almost burst into flames on the spot when I saw that. I can't even describe how much I was shaking after reading those messages. Firstly, that I could have confronted Josh about this months ago. I was, and still am, so furious with myself for that. Josh would have been fucking praying I didn't remember meeting Jake or that I wouldn't mention it, and he would have been counting his lucky stars that I never did. He probably thought he was hot shit for getting away with that, and I nearly burnt a hole through the floor thinking about it, lol. But secondly, I was just in shock that he had the balls to tell this guy that I'm the one who is married because he doesn't want anyone having it on with me, but he is allowed to coyly flirt with every fucking woman in the office. Anyway, I kept going back through the search results on his MS Teams, and eventually I got as far back as 2-ish years ago, and I did in fact find a message from Josh himself to a group chat. It said me and sis in Nusa Dua. I clicked on that and saw that he had sent it alongside a bunch of photos of him and I from our holiday to Bali. We went to Bali for our second anniversary. I thought he probably chose those photos because he's shirtless and had been working out, so he looked hot in all of them. I was in tears seeing all of this, obviously. I took screenshots of those too and airdropped all of the screenshots to myself. Needless to say, I was devastated, and still am, to see all of that. I am still struggling to even process it at all. But that all happened on Saturday morning, and I immediately took myself to my friend's house. I'll call her Sophie. I went to her place to cry it out and show her what I found, and she was extremely supportive and probably more furious than me, lol. At around 1:30 p.m. I got a phone call from Josh, and I hung it up immediately. He sent me a few messages along the lines of, "Where are you, baby? I'm ordering food, want some? Sad to not wake up next to you this morning." Guys, I have to reiterate how much I love this man, and how fucking heart-wrenching it was to see him still acting like nothing had gone wrong. It took so much willpower to not just pretend none of it had ever happened and go home to him. I know a lot of you will yell at me or accuse me of being terrified of confronting him about this, which is not true. Please have some empathy. It takes me time to process my emotions, and I wouldn't have even been able to form a sentence if I tried to confront him immediately after seeing those messages. I needed some time away with Sophie to recollect myself, and so I stayed the night at her place. She ordered us Chinese and she helped me plan how I would confront him. I got a bunch more texts and calls from him as the evening progressed, and I eventually put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Sunday morning I woke up feeling more angry than sad, so I opened my phone and finally replied to his messages. "Coming home now, need to talk." I kept it cryptic to make him squirm, to be honest. Because I was fraught with emotions, I can't remember the entire conversation word for word, but I'll try to replay it as best I can. Long story short, I got home and he tried to hug me, but I refused him and we just stood in the kitchen. I did confront him like someone suggested. I just said, "Why have you been telling your coworkers I'm your sister?" I wish it would have been like a movie scene where the color drained from his face, or he immediately looked like a deer in headlights, but he didn't. It was like he had been girding himself for this confrontation for a while, because he just frowned at me and looked flabbergasted. He just said, "Huh?" This made me so angry. How are you going to pretend to be stupid after 3 years of lying? I basically said, "Don't play fucking dumb. 2 of your coworkers have greeted me as your sister and I have proof of you telling them. And I know you're pretending to be single." Essentially, I asked him what he had to say for himself. He still played stupid. He became moderately defensive and just kept saying, "I don't know what you're talking about," or, "Why would I lie about you?" I cannot describe how furious I was at this point, but I was in tears. I always cry when I'm angry, so he was trying to comfort me as if I was having some kind of irrational breakdown. I showed him the screenshot of his message saying me and sis, and I said something like, "You tell me." He just said, "I don't know what I'm looking at," and, "I'm confused." I got so angry that I left again, and went back to Sophie's, because it felt like a dead-end road. I didn't think I was going to get him to admit to anything, and I was just getting so furious I couldn't continue. He was really upset and in tears, which to me was evidence that he knew he was lying and that he was going to have to come up with some explanation. He tried to get me to stay, but I told him that until you have something to say for yourself, we've got nothing to talk about. At like 8:30-ish, he called me again and I did pick up. He basically asked for us to talk and he said he has some things to say. So I went back to our apartment. He had written out a bunch of stuff on a piece of paper as if he had prepared a speech and sat me down on the couch. He asked me not to say anything while he was explaining himself. I'll write down the gist of what he said in bullet points. He started by apologizing relentlessly and admitting that he pretended to be stupid before because he couldn't immediately think of something to say for himself. He said that immediately after he started at his job, he realized the atmosphere was like a frat house. All of his team members were men in their 20s and 30s that were single and fuckboys, his word. He noticed that the one guy in their team that was married would either get picked on, or essentially excluded from any and all social interactions. That included getting lunch, inside jokes, going out on Friday, etc. These guys were friendly and welcoming to Josh, and he admitted that he was desperate to fit in with them. He hated feeling like fresh meat. So he was scared that saying he was married would alienate him from his coworkers, and at first just never mentioned that he was married. He said he did wear his wedding ring and that they had just never pointed it out. A few months in, they were all out drinking after work. He admitted that after one of his workmates saw a picture of him and I on his lock screen, they asked him who I was, and in a moment of panic he said, "My sister." He was really apologetic at this point, and he was crying a lot. He couldn't even look at me and he was just reading what he had written down. Anyway, he said that from then, he basically dug himself a deeper and deeper grave, because they kept grilling him about me and wanting to see more pictures of me. He said he had let it go on too long and that he didn't have the balls to admit to the lie. They would always bring me up and ask shit like, "Did you give her my number yet?" Or joke that they had slept with me, etc. So when he got that message from Jake, he essentially thought it was just him taking the piss, but he didn't like the jokes they were making about me and said that I was married in hopes they would stop. They didn't. He said that this wasn't the first time he told them I was married. In fact, he had said so pretty much immediately after saying I was his sister. He said that those pictures of us in Nusa Dua were the only pictures that he had purposefully sent them and deliberately lied about, after what he called an endless barrage of pestering from his colleagues to share the pics from his holiday. He said he was really ashamed that he did that. He told me that he had never had an affair or even considered it, that the messages between him and his female colleagues were banter and that it was commonplace to talk to people like that in the office. He also said he knows how disgusting it is and he is embarrassed to have been acting like a fuckboy. Again, his word. He concluded his speech by apologizing again, and said that he was disgusted with himself and ashamed that he had lied for so long, but felt like he had trapped himself and that he couldn't find a way to get himself out of it. He said he knows he could have confessed the truth to either his coworkers or to me at any point but that he didn't because he was a coward. He said that he'll confess to his entire office that he lied and that I am his wife and not his sister if I want him to. He said that he will quit his job without a word if it would make me feel better, and that he hopes I can forgive him but he understands if I can't. Anyway, I couldn't really think of anything to say at that point. He went to lock himself in the bathroom and I just sat on the couch crying. I still don't know if I can trust what he said, and a lie that extreme is just baffling to me. If he can lie like that, for so long, what else could he be lying about? But his explanation and apologies seemed so sincere and genuine, and I guess to an extent what he said is believable. He has always been extroverted but very susceptible to peer pressure, especially from other blokes. If nothing else, to me, it's a sign of shocking immaturity. Anyway, I packed up a bag and went back to Sophie's, and I'm still at her place as I'm writing this. She said I can stay as long as I need to. I told Josh that I needed time away from him to think about everything and whether or not I believe him or whether I can ever trust him again. He told me to take as long as I needed and that he will still be there if or when I get back, he said. Even if it takes a year. Right now nothing feels real. I'm still dealing with the emotional whiplash from all of this and I can't keep food down or think about anything. I've taken the day off work and Josh told me he's going to take off the whole week. Sophie and my other friends have told me not to make a decision on anything until my head is clear. I spoke to my parents this morning and my mom says it's just a bump in the road, but she and my dad adore Josh so they're pretty biased, lol. That's where I am right now. I'll take some time before I consider my next steps. I can't say whether I'm leaning towards forgiveness or divorce, but those are really the only options. I kind of feel lost in a void at the moment. That's probably the best way to describe it, just emptiness. Thanks again for all of your advice and support. I'm truly so grateful. And having this place to write down all of my thoughts has been helpful to get my mind a little clearer. This will be my last update, unless I make an edit to clear things up. All the best 3. My autistic son discovers an incredible talent just in time for the school talent show, surprising everyone. Poor souls struggle to make friends. Both the school and our family are constantly trying to help, but my sweet little boy simply cannot hack it. Despite all this, we keep trying. He is on the spectrum and loves talking about space and Apple. I am slowly teaching him social skills, but it takes a lot of face plantings for anything to stick. He absolutely drives us crazy by talking about Apple products over and over and over. One time he talked so much about Apple while I was driving that I zoned out to the point where I ran over a cone. Last night he hit me with the old, "I entered the talent show." I truly did not expect him to proceed with, "I'm going to recite every iPhone ever made." Usually, I try my best not to hurt feelings, but I simply cannot sit on the sidelines and watch my child commit social suicide. I gave an absolute no and reminded him all he talks about is Apple, and that his classmates do not want to sit there and listen to him talk about iPhones again. He bawled in my arms and said he had no talent. I let him cry it out, then we looked online at different talent show ideas. He didn't like anything he saw. Then a light bulb went off. This kid loves sound. He likes loud, annoying sounds that make me want to scratch my noise-sensitive ears out. So I downloaded him a DJ app and Tidal. We found 6 songs that carried a lot of the weight, then he began mixing. He was awesome. I couldn't believe how easily he took to it. By the end of the night he was able to echo out songs and do all of these cool siren sounds while waiting for the beat to drop. He even came up with fading out the last song and setting a vibrating alarm on his watch, 6 minutes, in order not to lose track of time. We agreed that as soon as the alarm goes off, if he isn't done, he will move on to the last song and fade it out quickly. We packed him a cool little outfit to wear with mirrored sunglasses, his iPad and speaker, then off he went to school. I have been praying all morning. His teacher was really excited for him and I hope he doesn't back out. Even if he does, I am hoping he will stick with this hobby and maybe enter in the next talent show. Comment: it went really great. Better than I expected, honestly. The kids got up and danced and his teacher said this is a moment she will always remember. She told us she wasn't supposed to say this, but he was the best out of all the kids. When he walked out of the door, he was beaming like a light. I think it's the first time he's ever felt connected with the kids. Now to the next story, story 2. Am I the asshole for breaking up with my unmotivated girlfriend who has nothing going for her and might become homeless? I, male 24, met a girl, female 22, in a community college class when I was 20. We came from very different backgrounds. I was middle class trying to find a cheaper way to go to college. She was living in almost poverty going to school because she was forced to by her parents who were threatening to kick her out. She dropped out about a year into her schooling while I continued and finished. During her first year we formed a relationship and she moved into my apartment more or less. Her relationship with her parents is pretty much non-existent and she has little to no outside friends besides 1 or 2 women she knew from high school, who are deadbeats in my opinion. I make around $80K a year so we live relatively comfortably, but there's still some strain on finances. I can't say exactly when I started losing feelings, but the fact that she refuses to work, will not cook and wants to eat out every day, does not want to go to school, and continuously wants to buy and spend money on clothes and other stuff just slowly started grating me more and more. I work in a female-dominated workplace, and having conversations, and interacting with coworkers who have so much going for them, have fun hobbies, and aspirations makes it all the more worse when your girlfriend is chronically online and spends 7 hours a day scrolling through Instagram or TikTok reels and thinks having sex is all she needs to do on her end. Our relationship isn't bad, we have fights every now and then like an average couple, have an active sex life, but that's pretty much it. From her perspective, if I broke up with her it would be out of nowhere, but I'm pretty much done, and now I could move on quickly and have nothing to be regretful about, as shitty as it sounds. The problem comes in her having no job, no finances, almost no friends and no family support unit. I'm not a monster, I don't want to make someone virtually homeless, but I don't want to be stuck with someone who has nothing going for them either. I don't know what to do. Edit. Thank you for all the advice in this post. I don't know if this sub allows updates, but I'll talk to her tomorrow about this and start the process of working this out. Relevant comments. OP explains. Yeah, if she was a toxic or just bad partner I wouldn't have too much trouble ending it, but she's fairly nice, just very lazy. I've tried to talk her into trying different hobbies or interests to get her active, but she always turns them down each time. How long? She wasn't as bad when we were still in school, she at least helped cook and had some aspirations to be a nurse. But I guess when she started getting comfortable, her habits built on until it got to this point. This wouldn't have been a 4-year relationship if this was how it started. She only leaves the apartment when I take her to get food. She either sleeps or is on her phone. Is she miserable with her life? She's not really miserable. She always sends me 30+ memes at work on IG, and is honestly a pretty funny person. She has her mood swings on some days, but that's how she usually is. I've tried talking to her about this more than once, but she either thinks I'm not being serious or tries to change the subject. The one time I was serious, she said would try looking at courses again, but it eventually fell through and I stopped trying. She just doesn't really care. Update 1. For starters, I want to thank everyone for all the advice I was given on the last thread, as it helped me formulate how I would go about doing this. When I made that post, I was having an extremely bad day and didn't expect it to blow up like it did, so I don't think I was able to give her a fair defense. Also, I got dozens of messages, ranging from asking me to hand out her contact info so they could take her in as a live-in-sex girlfriend, to helpful advice telling me to start hiding anything valuable. When I had said that she had come from poverty, her father is a laborer while her mother also lives a similar lifestyle to how she lives now. Their home is maybe 1,100 square feet and in a terrible place in town, and given her father's past ultimatum, I don't think he will take her back, as she hasn't been back home in years. Yes, I have talked to her about this, since January, maybe 3 times. Either by gently telling her it would be nice if she went out more to find a hobby, at the very least to flat out say she was wasting away on her phone and that she needs to get a job or go back to school. Each time she either changes the subject, makes it a joke, or follows through for a couple of days before going back to her usual self. She is a kind partner, who asks me about my day, always tries to make me laugh or lighten the mood when I get annoyed, and generally shows a lot of affection. Which makes me feel terrible when none of that works anymore, and I just see her as another person. Now for the confrontation. Last night when we were both getting ready for bed, I didn't take my clothes off and instead just stood there telling her we needed to talk. At first she was just smiling and jumping up and down on the bed with her knees, thinking I wasn't as serious as I was, but eventually she was able to read the mood. I told her something wasn't feeling right anymore, that I've tried to make this work and be patient with her for the past few years, but I didn't know how much more time I was willing to spend waiting for her to get a job, go back to school, or just get a hobby, if anything. I told her that it annoyed and grated me that she just didn't seem to care about herself, and that I hated that she had no goals or aspirations. This was probably the first time in a long time she was as attentive as she's ever been during this conversation. And agreed to whatever I was saying, even also giving suggestions on where she can apply, what courses were starting to interest her, and even said I could look over her as she submitted applications online to make sure she wasn't lying. In her head it seemed like I was still willing to make this work, and a part of me believed this would finally be the moment that she would change. So it made the next part even harder for me and for her. At first I told her I didn't love her the same way, which slowly but eventually led to me saying I didn't feel anything at all about this relationship and was jaded. I was tired and wanted a fresh start with someone who was more goal-oriented, and wanted something more out of life. When she realized what I was getting at, she started to cry and asked why I didn't mention this sooner, and I said I've always asked her to cook, to go out with me to try something out, or to just go back to school, even when I offered to pay for her classes. Anything. She said she understands that part, but was upset why I didn't say it was leading to me losing interest in her, because from her perspective it seemed as if I still loved her all the same. She started apologizing, saying she wasn't in the right mental state and saying nothing was motivating her. And she genuinely had no interest in any hobbies. The only thing she liked was spending time with me, which is all she looked forward to on the day when I came home. None of this was really affecting my emotions besides making me feel uncomfortable. So I tried to continue by saying, I think her lifestyle would be better with another person, but she immediately cut me off and became more panicked. She started to apologize again for what she's done and said she would be a better girlfriend, that she would go with me tomorrow to wherever I wanted to go and would look for courses in August that she could start doing. But she did not want to lose me since she had nothing else in life and absolutely hated that I stopped loving her. There were so many tears and snot that I said we would have this conversation again when she calmed down, and we eventually did in an hour or so. She pleaded to give her 2 months to make a change and give her another chance, and promised that she would change. Again she listed off all the places she would apply to and said she would be a better partner. I never wanted to make her homeless, so this seemed like a good settlement, even though I still had my doubts. I then reaffirmed that I wanted to see other people, but she seemed much more adamant on this issue than the aspirations issue that she would be able to fix this. She said just give her a month to try and make the relationship work, and asked me again and again on what she could do to make her love her again, and that she didn't want me to hate her. She said that this was the worst part of it all. In the only person that she had just done. It seemed as if she was about to break down again, so I said okay, we'll see how this relationship is in a month. In my mind, if I'm allowing her 2 months to get back on her feet, then by a month she would already be ready to move on. I also didn't want her to suffer a complete mental breakdown while I was still living with her, so giving her a month to let her fix the relationship would give her enough time to accept things. I slept on the couch last night and will probably continue doing so for a while. She came out at about 3 a.m. wanting to talk some more, but I said I was exhausted and we would do it tomorrow. She then slept on the floor beside me for the rest of the night, apologizing again. When I told her to stop, she silently said okay and sobbed for a bit under her blanket. But that's everything that's happened so far. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I regret nothing and feel much better letting everything out. I don't know how this situation will be in 2 months, but I was firm that it was the deadline. This post will probably get buried, so I probably won't do another update since I don't think anyone will care about this in a week or a month, but I will definitely private message those of you who have been helping me through this on how it turns out, or those who just want to be updated. But yeah, thanks. Edit, for all of you who keep asking what my workplace is, I'm a RN. Update 2, I feel like this will be an easier place to post since it's my page and I don't have to worry about over spamming with small or inconsequential updates anywhere else, as it's only for those wanting to read. I want everyone who has privately messaged me to know I read them all, especially those of you who have gone through similar circumstances as me and have shared your stories. I've been doing some self-reflection and think I know how I want to go about this that will help with my lack of communication skills. I know I'm not a perfect person, but I still stand by my decisions I made that night 100% through and through. I might post an update sooner in a week or so, as the day after our fight I'm filled with a bit more hope than usual. Don't know how long it will last, but better make use of it. But again, I just wanted to post this for everyone sharing your stories with me privately, as I can't message you all, as it's been helping me make decisions on what to do about this all immensely. Hello, I have a partner who wants to start taking an interest in baking. She's a bit self-conscious and doesn't like asking or looking for outside help, and I'm kind of clueless in the subject, but I want to be able to find a resource to give some help for her. Are there any YouTube playlists or something similar you would all recommend to get started for someone who has little experience cooking as well? Update 3. This is a long post, and no, I'm not going to give a TLDR. Hey all, it's been about a week since my last post and I thought I'd give an update. A lot has happened, including the explosion of my first update thread. I have over 50 plus DMs asking me for an update, so instead of copy and pasting replies, I'll do another one. I find it easier to write than to speak in many situations, so this has been a great way to help my decisions and clear my head. Writing everything down has helped tremendously, and I will continue to do so until this is all over and I will nuke everything afterwards. After the night confrontation, we didn't really speak all too much at home, with it being dry and awkward for a day or two, but I have been told I'm a workaholic by nature, so it was easy for me to stay at the hospital as a distraction, but in that time she did start to cook again. We weren't in the mood to go out to eat together. Eventually though, I sat down with her after she asked for a more thorough conversation on why I felt our relationship was failing. She promised not to cry or get upset, but wanted me to be 100% upfront so she had a better way of understanding, stating she wanted to try everything to fix this. I was really apprehensive about this and I can't really explain why, but given being together for 4 years I wanted to at least make an effort myself out of respect, even though a large part of me was angry for even doing so, as I feel I've never had the same from her. There have been many different camps in my last update, the main ones being kick her out immediately and leave her before it gets worse, try to find a way to fix our relationship or end the relationship altogether, but continue living with someone who would probably become absolutely neurotic. If I was going to let her stay for 2 months, I would absolutely not be dealing with that. I took consideration in all these main advice discussions and read through almost every reply. Even the most assumptive, bizarre and downright unhinged Redditor takes. More importantly, I took heavy influence from those who have shared with me their past stories, which either led to them being stuck in loveless relationships for years or eventually being able to overcome their problems and have an even stronger connection. Thank you again for your private messages. I read through a lot of your lives. Now for our conversation. She said she saw something on TikTok where couples put a phone on a table with a timer and wanted to do something similar, for each person to air what made them upset. I said that was dumb. If we were going to talk about our problems, it would be better if there was no time limit. She eventually agreed and said I could go first, asking me first when was the time that I completely lost my love for her. As I said before, it was never one action, but a grating feeling that got worse and worse until it got to this point, and I told her that, so she then asked when was the time I felt the most angry. I said it would take some time to think for me, and she said that was fine. After a few minutes something came to mind. I couldn't formulate the right words at first, but it eventually just started to come out. I told her the worst time was when I was first starting at my hospital. To keep it short, the tempo was brutal. It was constant work with little to no downtime, as I was constantly learning new things that school had never taught me, while being expected to be able to handle it as a professional. It was without a doubt the most stressed I've ever been, and I feel like other RNs can relate here. That year hardened the way I think now. That hard work does pay off, if you have the drive and the passion. I told her I think that was when I started losing feelings the fastest, seeing her at home doing absolutely nothing. Coming home to no food made, to her not working a job, to her not learning anything, completely stuck to the internet with nothing to show for it. I said it made me even more upset when I had given suggestions for jobs with pretty easy schedules, or to find a new interest in school that would pan out better than last time, only to be rejected at every attempt. I told her flat out that it disgusted me. She asked me why I didn't make this a bigger issue at the time, that I should have communicated this to her, but I said there's some things that shouldn't have to be said. I shouldn't have to remind her to wash her ass, eat, do something other than mindlessly scrolling on her phone for hours at a day, every day. I also told her that after coming home from the hospital during more stressful days, the last thing I wanted was to spend my time begging my girlfriend to do something productive, so I held my tongue and settled as she was still nice and caring. I had no other reasons to end it, and so the resentment grew worse from then on. It was around here that I became more mean to my regret now, but I will still input it as I have everything else. I told her that when she dropped nursing, I was upset since I felt that she was more than capable of doing what I had done. But after spending more time in the relationship, and spending more time getting to know her, I knew that with the type of person she was, there was no way she could have ever finished. Which is why I suggested easier and more laid-back jobs, less demanding majors for school. Shit, even if she just cooked or found an interesting hobby at that point, I would have appreciated it. Still, she chose to do nothing for years. It's just the type of person she was, and why I felt done for her romantically over time. She asked me if I hated her, and I said I didn't know. I told her she was very loving and kind, but I hated how she handled her life to this point. That I felt no ill will towards her after airing everything out, but I also felt nothing else. I just felt done and ready to move on. Throughout this conversation we kept eye contact, and there were times it seemed like she would break, but like she said, she remained as calm as she could while I said what I had to say. I told her I was done and she could say her piece now, but she asked if we could continue the conversation later and locked herself in our room for the rest of the day. The next day we sat down again and finished the conversation. She told me that she thinks she's depressed, saying that she didn't feel sad before that night, just had no motivation to do anything. I had a couple of messages telling me to ask her to get tested for ADHD, but when I started bringing it up she was very adamant that is not something she felt comfortable with. I knew she didn't like needles or going to the hospital in general, but her flat-out refusing to get tested for disorders when I told her it was not at all like a regular hospital visit surprised me. She asked me if she was able to change her behavior. Would I give her another chance? I said I didn't know, as I felt nothing right now and didn't know if her doing it would bring any feeling back. Especially since it took my breaking point to do so. She asked if there was any compromise, and I told her again, if in a month I felt like there was enough reason to stay together I would, but that there was no guarantee that my feelings would return. But I would match any effort she also put out. She was frustrated by my answer, but I said that's how it would be. She gave me a piece of paper to look at that she was working on last night that had a list of hobbies and interests she wanted to look into, the two major ones being photography and cooking again. She told me that she was looking into these while also showing me her phone, giving proof that she was putting in applications on Indeed and Glassdoor for some entry-level positions that she might get hired in. I told her if she was able to show enough passion or interest in these hobbies that she showed, I would not care about her working, just anything to improve herself. But if she didn't do anything at all, then it would be best to look for a new job to help her if she moves out. I've also been asked in private messages if I have any personal friends to talk to. There's two female coworkers I confide some information in given how many hours we work together at our hospital, and who I completely trust, as in my opinion they are extremely grounded. They both said I would eventually get love bombed and this would all go back to how it once was, and that I needed to stand firm with moving on. They've very helpful friends who have even offered to let me stay over for a few nights, giving the reason that I would fall for her manipulation if I continued being anywhere near her, in their own words. But it didn't feel right since I'm still technically in a relationship. But I said I would consider it if the situation worsened. But again, I find them grounded, so I always try to take their advice to heart. Despite numerous messages from you all privately or openly telling me that this will be a mistake, I want to make the attempt to give this one last try. Though I feel heavily closed and guarded and still feel indifferent with our current situation. But a lot of you have told me this can eventually change with enough work from both parties. I have also taken the advice of those saying to cut off sex, which was my intention from the start anyway, by continuing to sleep in the living room. But each day she has been sleeping on the floor right below me even when I tell her I'd rather be alone with my thoughts, telling me this is something she would not accept. But that's everything so far. Next update will probably be at the month mark as there's nothing else I feel like I need to say for now, just waiting to see if things can get better now that we're working on this somewhat. Am I the asshole for refusing to raise my husband's children from his affair now that he and the woman he cheated with have passed away? Sorry for using a new account. I know that's a red flag, but I don't want to risk using my old Reddit account. My 45F husband, 49M, of 23 years has been having an affair with a 20-years-old girl since 2020. I found out this year when his affair partner gave birth to twin boys in March. Obviously we were going to divorce. We've been hashing things out since. It's been a lengthy process due to some properties in common and we needed to get an accountant since he used the shared account for his affair. Finally things seemed to be getting close to the end when both my husband and the woman he cheated with were killed in a car crash. By some miracle the twin babies were not harmed in the crash. Now they are orphaned and neither set of grandparents can take them in permanently. My husband's parents are both in assisted living, he has no siblings and the only aunt that could take them refuses. She's been child-free her whole life. On the woman's side, I'm not sure the details in full, but her parents are also not able to be involved long-term and the one sister she has lives overseas. Since we were still married and he had not updated his will, all his assets are set to pass to me and our 2 children. I'm not callous enough to leave those babies with nothing, so I agreed to let whoever is their legal guardian to have the remaining balance in the shared account. About $25,000 in savings. The issue is no one wants to take them in. Now my in-laws are pressuring me to take them in and raise them. The issue is, I don't want to. At all. I wouldn't love them and I don't want to be the evil stepmother. But I know a big part of me will always have a level of resentment towards them. I will probably favor my own children. It's not their fault, but I truly loved my husband and I thought we were happy before I found out about the affair. We have 2 daughters, 14 and 16. Obviously we had disagreements, but never insulted each other before. Then I found out about the affair and he began calling me names and blaming me for his cheating. He became abusive and even tried to kick me off the house, my childhood home that is not shared property for the record. I'm also raising teenagers alone now. I don't have the energy to raise babies anymore. My daughters hate their baby brothers. I tried to get them to spend time with their dad as we were divorcing, but they refused. Since this all was found out because of the babies, there wasn't really a way to sugarcoat the situation. And they are also too old to really get away with it. Most of my friends agree it's not my place to care for those children. But my in-laws, the affair woman's parents and my mother want me to raise them. I know my mom is just having grandkids fever, but it hurts to not have her support. I have to make a decision by next week or the boys will be going into foster care. At the moment they are temporarily placed with their maternal grandparents. I feel horrible, but I am very sure I can't take them in. Small update. Hey everyone, this blew up far more than I thought, and I appreciate the well wishes for my girls, the boys and myself. Also for the amount of lovely people offering to see about giving the twins a good home. I might not be their mother, but it does touch me and makes me glad there's good people out there. After thinking carefully and speaking to my lawyer, reading responses, doing research, etc. I plan to speak to the grandparents tomorrow and refuse to take legal guardianship of the boys. I will let them know of the usernames of people that offered meetings for private adoptions or fostering, but my daughters are my priority. It'll be up to the twins' grandparents to decide if they'll proceed with adoption, keep them, or turn them to the state. I wish I had the mental capacity to be the person to do this, but I have 2 girls that are going through a lot and they need my full attention. I'll also be talking to the lawyers to figure out if the boys have any inheritance claim properly. If they do, I'll separate it and leave it to the lawyers to do what they need to do for them to have access when it's best. If they don't, I'll find a way to ensure they have access to the $25,000 I was going to give them since the beginning. I won't do more however. My moral compass might be biased, but I don't believe I'm obligated neither morally or legally to do more than what the word of law says. I can't help everyone and I shouldn't have to. I have 2 girls that lost their father, 2 girls that need therapy, 2 girls just about to get to college. They've gone through enough without seeing their mother favor the children of their father's mistress. Now to the next story, story 2. My stepmother abused my fiance's young brother, causing a family rift that threatens to destroy our wedding and relationships forever. Original post, mention of child Abu *E. It's not too graphic, but it's there. I tried posting this on AITA through a different account a couple days ago, But it didn't work out. Given the trigger warning, I'm not surprised. I have since concluded my wife and I did the right thing, so this will be my last attempt to post this story. I tried to add some info and change the wording a little. All names are fake. My 28M stepmother, 49F, is a wannabe party planner. She has taken it upon herself to plan and host every party and holiday my dad's family has thrown since she married him. I never loved those occasions growing up. She's controlling and gets upset if people complain about anything, but humored her for my dad's sake. According to him, this helps her feel included. I'm getting married to my fiancée Jane, 26F, in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but Jane ended up getting pregnant a couple months after that, and we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son for a while. So we've had a long engagement. My stepmother has tried to hijack our wedding plans from day one, complaining, contacting our planner, showing up unannounced to Jane's dress appointments, etc. And we have repeatedly asked her to stop. Dad wants us to humor her, but she's clearly resentful of the fact that she's not hosting the wedding or being labeled mother of the groom in invitations. Besides our baby boy, we also have Luke, 4M, Jane's paternal half-brother. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship, after his parents died. I ended up moving in with them during the pandemic, and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. He doesn't call me dad, and refers to us as his sister and his OP, but we love him like a son. Stepmother though hates Luke. She accuses Jane of baby trapping her way into the family. That accusation only got worse after our son was born. My dad gets along with Jane and adores the kids, but stepmother demands him to refuse babysitting Luke, so we don't leave the kids with them often. Instead, Jane's brother and CL usually watch the kids for us, as their children are close to ours in age. We had a thing last Sunday, and my Bill was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mom and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place and we left. We came back to find both kids crying, stepmother screaming, and dad weakly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had told stepmother that both he and our son were going to be our ring bearers, and she went ballistic. She screamed that she wasn't going to allow that because he wasn't family. She then made me need to include the trigger warning when he started crying. His lip is still split. She'd never gotten to this point before. We immediately banned her from our house and from our wedding. Dad is fuming and has said he's not going without her. He's also convinced half of his side of the family, by severely downplaying what stepmother did, to boycott the wedding as well. This includes my stepbrother, who fully agrees with his mother no matter how many times I try to tell him the truth. Me and Jane are refusing to budge, but many of my cousins who aren't coming anymore are asking us to reconsider. Pretty much all of Jane's family agrees with us, but one of her aunts has suggested that maybe stepmother is acting out because she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. I've honestly had it with my family enabling her behavior. I love my dad and really want him at my wedding, but I am more than willing to go NC if it means protecting my family. Edit. I think I accidentally deleted the paragraph where I mentioned this, but we did press charges. We took Luke to the pediatrician the next day and gathered every piece of evidence we had. Not only did we have pictures of Luke's face, but by some miraculous strike of luck, we also had nanny cam footage. Some commenters were right to assume that my SM hadn't been invited to our house, but my dad hasn't really gone anywhere without her in years, so we took precautions. We didn't expect her to actually do anything this awful, but we've never trusted her with the kids. The physical attack happened off camera, but there is some footage of her screaming and Luke crying before and after the event. She now has a child abuse charge on her rap sheet. We wouldn't let her get away with this. Edit 2. There is a lot of additional info I want to add. I'll try to respond to at least some of the comments. I did not expect the amount I've gotten so far, but all I'll add for now is that Luke is okay. The visit to the pediatrician happened the day after. He already had a counselor. Jane was pretty traumatized when her dad and stepmom died, and was worried it would rub off on him, and will continue treatment. We've been hugging and pampering him a little more than usual too. He's still upset, but is already doing much better. Update 1. I want to thank everybody who took the time to read and/or comment on my previous post. It's been a tough week, but it's always great to know that people care. I haven't been able to reply to every comment, but I will try to address some in this update. This might get a little long. I'll start off by saying that me and Jane are going NC with my dad and SM. We haven't really spoken to either of them since the incident, and I don't plan on being the one to reach out. Any communication between us is being handled by my younger sister. She's completely on our side, but will remain in low contact for the time being. I've decided to adopt Jane's way of dealing with people she cares about. Forgive what's apologized for, but never forget. Basically, if Dad or SM ever truly understand what they did wrong and sincerely apologize, we're willing to forgive them. Even if begrudgingly so. But we will never ignore, or let them forget, what they did to our family. And for the time being, neither of them will be allowed near Luke, our baby, and any other kids we may have in the future, even if we do forgive them. As for the rest of my family, I read a lot of comments suggesting that I post pictures of Luke's face, as well as the nanny cam footage. I'm not very active on social media, but even if I was, I'm not comfortable exposing my injured preschooler like that, especially given that nothing on the internet ever truly goes away. I also decided not to share the pictures with my family unless truly necessary. I should probably mention that while my family adores my dad, most of them aren't very fond of SM. She had 2 failed marriages prior to meeting my father, the first of which resulted in my stepbrother, and he cheated on his then girlfriend to be with her. My family loved that girlfriend and disliked SM right away. Not only has she been controlling and manipulative since the beginning, she's also tried to force her way into the family matriarch role by any means possible. Taking over planning duties for every family event was her favorite way to do it, because of all the attention and compliments that come with it. The main reason why I hated these parties growing up was because she'd always find a way to make everything about her, including Christmas and mine and my sister's birthdays. The rest of the family felt neutral about it, but they never liked her. With Luke, it was different. Most of my relatives didn't meet him until COVID restrictions got looser, and by then he was 2 years old. He's a bright and genuinely lovable kid, and there weren't really any other small children in the family, so everyone immediately started cooing over him. The way I see it, SM got upset that Jane and Luke were accepted by my family so easily compared to her experience, and that's why she resents them both, but I can't confirm that. She was also mad that, aside from not being the planner, she would have absolutely no involvement in the wedding party. She tried to pressure us into letting her officiate. One of Jane's best friends was offered that role a year ago, making Stepbrother my best man. He wasn't interested and I'd already gotten my best friend. Or asking her sister's daughter to be our flower girl. We'd promised Jane's 3-year-old niece, also her sister's daughter is 15 and doesn't know us. She also tried to convince us to let my dad walk Jane down the aisle, since her father's gone, but her eldest brother, the Bill I mentioned in the first post, had already been enlisted. SM was disappointed that my family wasn't as involved in the wedding as Jane's, and kept making comments about how that would never happen if we put her in charge. All of that being said, there's nothing that can excuse being that awful to a child, especially if it really is the petty jealousy that I suspect. Because I haven't spoken with my father, my sister has been keeping me updated on what he's been up to. As I found out through her, the story my dad and SM told the rest of the family completely erases Luke's injury and the abuse charges. It insinuates that me and Jane banned them because we got annoyed with SM and decided to take it out on my dad as well. Because most people already disliked SM, explaining what actually happened that night wasn't hard, and most of the relatives that I actually wanted at the wedding have apologized and are berating my dad as well. The people that didn't believe us, as well as those saying we overreacted, have been told they are not welcome in our home anymore. Those are mostly people from my dad's generation, so I can't say I'm surprised. But the realization that they are so biased they're willing to protect a woman they hate, after she hurt a child, just to make my dad happy has reassured me that I don't need any of them in my life. Stepbrother is still in denial. He refuses to believe his mother could hurt a child, even with all the evidence we have. I have to admit I understand. I love my mom too, but that doesn't mean I'd excuse his obliviousness. So he's banned too. It sucks, because we were close growing up, but I don't regret it. Besides, Jane has 3 other siblings besides Luke, the older Bill, a twin brother and a younger sister, and I'm closer to them than I ever was to him. Speaking of Jane's family, they're all furious over what happened, and have been extremely supportive of us. Jane's maternal family basically adopted Luke after she got custody of him, and have called frequently to make sure he's okay. We did manage to save some money with everybody we uninvited, and have decided to use it to help Jane's cousin. She lives in a different country, and was previously unable to come to the wedding, so we're paying for her plane ticket. Luke has gotten much better, and is almost completely back to being the sunny child he's always been. The split lip was shallow. It's healing slowly, but didn't require any stitches. We sat him down a few days ago, and explained that my dad and stepmonster wouldn't be around anymore. He really liked my dad, but understands that he and SM are attached at the hip. He's clearly scared of her, but we're doing our best to make him feel safe. Me and Jane have reassured him that he is family, we love him and no one will ever change that. I'm not too worried about Dad or SM trying to show up at the wedding, but we've alerted the venue and given them pictures just in case they try anything. Better safe than sorry. Some people brought attention to the fact that SM is a hypocrite for saying Luke isn't family. I agree, for obvious reasons. Her main excuse for pretty much everything she does is that she doesn't feel like my family welcomes her. Dad has been guilting me to take part in everything she plans by reminding us of that for as long as I can remember. The way he continues to make excuses for her without realizing this is basically a case of the pot calling the kettle black, except Luke actually is family, is what has made me accept that, while I will always love my dad, it's not healthy or safe for me and my family to be around him anymore. It hurts to know my son won't have his only remaining bio-grandfather in his life, but he has two amazing step-grandpas to make up for it. For now, I'm sad, but satisfied with how things have turned out. I don't like to complain about my life. It's a mess, but a beautiful one. I love my fiancé, I love my kids, and I'm lucky enough to love my job. We're happy. I'm not letting anyone ruin that. To whoever was annoyed at my censorship. When posting on AITA didn't work out, Jane suggested I make the writing less explicit. I'm not used to Reddit yet, so I might have overdone it a little bit. I hope this is my last update on this story, but I'll keep you posted. Again, thank you for all your love and support. Best wishes to all of you. Relevant comments from OOP. The only reason why I know that this is the first time she's hit him is because this was the first and last time she was with the kids unsupervised. Me and Jane were around every previous time she saw Luke. She didn't want my dad to babysit him, and we'd only asked him to on a few occasions before. My sister was still living with them at the time, and has assured me that Luke was never out of her sight. I know and trust my sister enough to believe her. First time or not, I will not give her a second chance. She'll never hurt either of my kids again. OOP when told to secure passwords with all vendors. We've actually had passwords with the vendors since day one. Some of the earlier ones we met actually recommended us to do it. SM did contact our planner a while back saying she had our approval to talk to our vendors. She didn't let her, and we got a bit more strict with passwords after that. Commenter, so is SM serving any jail time? If she attacked a child then and you guys pressed charges, I would imagine she would have to be processed and eventually serve some time for her crime. OOP, we hope so. We're setting up a date for the arraignment. Commenter. Start a file for SM. Keep any and all texts, voicemails and attempts of her communicating. Do the same with anyone who has taken her side because she could escalate, and you may need that info. Those people are flying monkeys and she's sent them to not only plead her case, but report back to her the things you may have told them so she can continue to play her victim card. You were great to have the nanny cam, but should also make sure to notify his daycare or school that she is not to be given info or access to him. Get cameras that have audio just in case she shows up at your house and password protect all of your wedding vendors and let them know not to give her any info and to notify you if she tries. Your dad may be harmless, but she's not. OOP. That second advice is something we've been pretty occupied with, actually. This past week has been mostly about the kids and collecting evidence, but I'll definitely check out the JN Mill sub. Commenter, did you say that if your father and stepmonster apologize that you will allow them at your wedding? I wasn't quite sure what you were saying. OOP, absolutely not. My father and SM are not welcome at the wedding, no matter the circumstances. They could offer me an island and I'd still refuse to let them come back into our lives right now. I only plan to forgive anything far off in the future, and only if they apologize sincerely. Even then, they will have no access to the kids for years after that. Knowing SM, I highly doubt she'll ever feel sorry for what she did, so we're not counting on it anyway. Update 2. I'll start off by, probably, disappointing a lot of people. We're coming to terms with the fact that it's unlikely SM will get anything more than a slap on the wrist. Me and Jane are discussing our next move with our lawyer, but we're still not sure how we're going to move forward. It's too early to tell anyway, so we're trying not to get ahead of ourselves any more than we already have. However, I'm relieved to announce that we're getting started on the process for a restraining order against SM. We're using the same evidence we gathered the week following the incident, including the nanny cam footage and pictures of Luke, and we'll focus on that for the time being. I still haven't spoken to my father. My sister is still in LC, but is seriously considering cutting ties with him. Because my sister is the only one on my side that still talks to him, my father keeps trying to ask her about me, and whether I've calmed down, yet. According to her, he's annoyed that half of his family refuses to talk to him, but still doesn't seem to accept why. I told my sister that she doesn't need to keep playing messenger pigeon between me and our father. I never asked her to do it, and it's clearly taking a toll on her. But she insists she'll stop when it feels right. By the way, there's absolutely no doubt whether SM attacked Luke. Not only did Luke say at the moment we got home, but that was also confirmed by my father in a failed attempt to defend her behavior. He never tried to hide it from us. That, and the fact that he gave Luke an ice bag, is literally the only positive thing I can say about his actions. And SM was too busy screaming about how much of a whining brat Luke was being to deny it. To those who guessed SM is younger than my dad, you get an invisible cookie. She's also 5 years younger than his previous girlfriend. They got together when I was around 15. Also, my stepbrother is only a month older than me. She turns 50 later this year, had him at 21, married his father a year later. Both our kids are doing mostly okay. Luke's back to running around the house in his Superman costume whenever he doesn't have anything better to do. He did have a few nightmares this past week, and is asked to sleep on our bed twice. We don't mention my father around him, and he's still seeing his counselor. Our 14-month-old son has learned 2 new words, hi and bye, and Luke is trying to teach him to say his name. Jane's sister, who moved away for college, is coming over for a couple days to celebrate her 21st birthday later this month. Luke's excited to see her, and Jane's excited to get drunk with her. Can't say I blame her. We're hoping her presence will cheer us all up. I'm not doing so good, and neither is Jane. She's usually the kind of person who tries to keep her negative emotions to herself, but she cried herself to sleep almost every night the week it happened. It breaks my heart to see her like that, and I can't help but feel like this is my fault. There's a part of me trying to tell myself I had no way of knowing SM would do anything like that, but that doesn't really change anything. I allowed my father near my kids unsupervised, even though I knew she'd probably tag along. This is the guiltiest I've ever felt, and I don't think I'll ever forgive myself. Jane has been improving lately, and is trying to convince me to see a therapist. I've never really done that before, apart from a psychiatrist when I was younger, but now feels like a good time to give it a try. I was surprised by a few messages this week from people telling me to forgive my father and SM, as well as re-invite them to the wedding. That's not happening. In fact, I'm not willing to ever forgive SM. My dad has now degraded to a huge maybe, but I will never understand or forget what she did. Also, though the wedding is the last thing on our minds right now, we're not postponing it. We considered rescheduling, but the date we'd settled on is pretty much the only one that works for our guests. We have passwords with all our vendors, and gave them all clear instructions not to talk to anyone but us. Jane's family is bigger and closer to each other, which is why they're more involved in the wedding than mine, but I do have family participating. My sister is one of the bridesmaids, 2 of my cousins are groomsmen, and my mom is walking down the aisle with the wedding party. Going through all of this with Jane has made me understand even more just how much I love this woman. I couldn't ask for a better partner to start a family with, and I have no idea what I'd do without her. This didn't tear us apart, and I couldn't be more thankful. I probably won't make any more updates until after the wedding, unless something big happens. In the meantime, as always, best wishes to all of you. Update 3. I didn't plan on updating again before the wedding, but something pretty huge happened. The good news is we got the RO. The bad news is me and Jane had to see both SM and my father at the court hearing. This was our first time seeing them since we kicked them out of our house over a month ago, and neither of us were looking forward to it. We left the kids with Jane's brother and Sil, so at least Luke didn't have to see them. The hearing itself went a lot quicker than I expected. I'll give credit where it's due. My father was, at the very least, smart enough to understand there was no way they were winning this. There was a lot of evidence against them. Not only did we have the nanny cam footage and Luke's pictures and medical record, but my sister had also gathered every text and email SM had sent her and the family about what happened. And SM hates speaking on the phone, so there were a lot of those. They didn't even bother to get an attorney for the hearing. The judge granted us a protection order against SM. She's not allowed within 500 feet of us or our property anymore. We're changing all our locks this week, and I'm thinking about changing my phone number as well. I have to admit, the moment we left the courthouse was the safest I'd felt since this whole ordeal started. Jane was close to tearing up with joy when we got to the car. We picked up the kids and went to McDonald's with Bill and his family to celebrate. Hours later, my father called me. The order doesn't extend to him, so he can still do that. Jane and the kids were in bed, so I answered. I didn't expect him to change his mind and apologize all of a sudden, but decided to give him one last chance. He tried to start some awkward small talk, but I told him to get to the point. He asked me if the order was truly necessary. I stated, very clearly, that SM was never coming near Jane or my children again, and that I was glad I had an RO to formalize that. Every excuse he had for SM was pretty easy to shut down, but she only hit him once. Yep, and that's enough for me. The kids need their grandma. She's not their grandma, Mom is. She's my wife. You need to respect her. She attacked Luke, She disrespected my family in my own house. I don't owe her anything, least of all my respect. He then went on a rant about family, how much of a godsend SM was and everything she'd done for me and my sister since she came into our lives. I replied by listing every time I could remember about her lying, overstepping a boundary or acting unhinged around me, my family or my sister. I brought up both my adult life and my youth. Examples included her attempts to hijack most of our milestones. Recently, our wedding plans, our son's birth, Jane's baby shower and my sister's college graduation. Her obsession with the idea of a perfect family, and her disgusting attitude towards Luke. I also made sure to mention her habits of going through mine and my sister's stuff when we were younger. It's trivial, compared to everything else, but this behavior went on until my sister moved out of their house, only 3 months ago. We're pretty sure she found out about Jane's wedding dress appointments by reading my sister's planner while she wasn't home, for instance. Some of the memories I mentioned are long and hard to explain, but they did cement the fact that SM means nothing to me. He tried to go with the whole, she doesn't feel included excuse again, but I shut him up. I said he'd had the opportunity to protect his grandchildren, but had chosen his monster of a wife instead, and that's enough for me to want nothing to do with him. I hung up without saying goodbye. My sister told me he called her afterwards, and she told him she was going NC with him as well. I think we're both starting to accept our father won't change. It sucks, but he's made his priorities clear, and his children and grandkids aren't among them. For now, that's it. Now that they're fresh in my mind, I'm thinking about sharing some of the stories I reminded my father of, but that's gonna take a while. Until then, as always, best wishes to all of you. Relevant comments. Commenter, but she only hit him once would have ended the phone call for me. OOP, I almost hung up on him when he said that. The only reason I didn't was because I knew I wasn't gonna talk to him again anytime soon, and I still had a lot to say. Commenter. I am curious how your stepbrother is handling all of this. Like, the RO is something you can't just push away. A judge stated that what his mother did was so terrible she needed to stay away from those children. It just feels like something you can't stick your head in the sand and claim that you could never believe that your mother could hurt someone like that. OOP, I haven't spoken to him since days before the RO, and he hasn't tried to contact me or my sister. He was still in denial last time we talked, but seemed a bit doubtful. TBH, I think he's the only one who isn't a complete lost cause and still has a slight chance of coming around. He's still banned, but I might be willing to talk to him about this whole thing. Commenter. Holy hell. If you are comfortable sharing, I know many of us would want to hear those hijacking stories. Hope the kids don't have too terribly long an impact on their life from this, especially the preschooler. OOP. Luke hasn't mentioned her in a while. I don't doubt he was affected by this, but I think he understands everything is okay now. Our baby is barely a year old. And if it's up to me, he won't even know she exists until he's grown. I'll definitely share some of the stories as soon as I can bring myself to write them down. Commenter. It's crazy how the court gave your dad a chance not to give him the protection order and you gave him a chance to explain on the phone and he still managed to screw up. You guys gave so many chances and your dad fails to see that SM is a bad person. Your dad doesn't seem like he's going to change, and until he does, somehow stop giving him more chances. OP, that was his last chance, and he blew it. If he ever comes around, and that's a big if, it'll still take me a long time to allow him back into our lives. Update 4. After being engaged for over 2 years, me and Jane finally got married last Saturday. We're still getting used to calling each other husband and wife, but we'll get there. Hopefully. The wedding was awesome. The kids had fun, our extended families finally met, and we danced so much I could barely stand the next day. Luke took his ring-bearer duties seriously, and held my son's hand as they walked down the aisle. Besides my aunt getting shit-faced and being let out on a wheelchair, which I already thought would happen anyway, everything went according to plan. It's been 4 months since we got the RO against SM. Things have been mostly quiet, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Except completely quiet, but we can't always get what we want. I never really worried about SM showing up at the wedding, especially after the RO. It's literally illegal for her to come close to us, and we made it very clear that if she tried, we'd call the cops right away. My friend still warned me to take safety measures, most of which I did. SM didn't show up, of course, but I'm a strong believer that any money spent on security is well spent, so no regrets on that end. My stepbrother and I wished each other happy birthdays, and he also texted Jane on hers back in June. That's the only contact we've had during these months. He knows that the door is still open if he wants to apologize. My dad has given up on trying to reach me. We haven't spoken since April. He's still trying to talk to my sister, for some reason, but she's ignoring him. A few days after she went NC with him, they had a huge fight over the phone about SM's treatment of us over the years. Insults were thrown, sore subjects were brought up and, most importantly, my father took SM's side on almost everything. My sister called me crying afterwards. I wanted to call him and yell at him, but she told me not to. She's doing okay now. She hasn't blocked him, but doesn't take his calls or answer his texts. She's only gotten 3, a weak apology, one on my birthday back in May, and a long rant after neither of us wished him a happy Father's Day. After all, despite our differences, he's still our father. He's not wrong. I love my father, and I always will, but I can't be around him anymore. While I've closed that door, I'm not locking it just yet. He knows what he needs to do if he wants his family back. I don't think he'll do it, but if there's the slightest chance he might, I'll consider opening the door an inch or two. This is my wife's suggestion. I'm a lot less optimistic than she is, but maybe it's important to hold on to that hope. She hasn't forgiven him though. Or SM, Jane has always been very protective of Luke, so it was no surprise that this disaster shook her. A part of me was scared she'd blame me, but she called me a dumbass when I told her that. I've been in therapy for a few months and it's helped a lot more than I thought it would. I've realized SM's behavior around me growing up was a lot worse than I always thought, and it's great to finally be able to get my feelings off my chest. Right now, I'm more than happy. I just married the most amazing woman ever, and I have the family I always dreamed of. None of us are perfect, but I never thought life would be this great to me. I'll stick around. Reddit is a lot more than I expected, but I can sleep peacefully now, so it's safe to say this will be my last update on this. Thank you all for the kindness and advice you gave me these months. I could have never expected the support I got from you guys, and I can't begin to describe how helpful it was. Seriously, thank you all. Edit 3 days later. Okay, I updated too soon. I didn't want to write another post, so I'll just add this here. My stepbrother called me earlier today. Apparently, he and SM had a fight and he wants to meet up. I agreed as long as it was just the two of us. We're meeting up for coffee on Wednesday. I have no idea what to expect, but even if he does apologize, I need to know he understands how and why he let us down. New update. Hey guys. I've been away from Reddit for a few months, due to some stuff at work. But a lot of people have been messaging me about my stepbrother, so I want to give you a small update. I've been busy and tired these days, so I might gloss over some details. Feel free to ask me anything. I first met my stepbrother for coffee back in August. He'd had a fight with SM and the RO was brought up. She'd lied to him about some details, accusing Luke of picking on my baby, badmouthing Jane and more, but this time, he managed to force her to tell him the truth. My stepbrother started to reevaluate his relationship with his mother. After talking to his therapist and his friends about it, as well as the way she'd raised him, he finally accepted I wasn't exaggerating about what she did to Luke. He wanted to talk to me back in June, but didn't want to distract me and Jane from the wedding. Me and my stepbrother spent the last 4 months working on rebuilding our relationship. We've been meeting for coffee or lunch and discussing his mother and what she did to our lives and my kids. Jane started joining us in October, and the kids saw him again for the first time 2 weeks ago. Things were awkward between us for a while, but we're good now. He's also making amends with my sister. In early November, he completely cut contact with SM. Jane and the kids are doing amazing. Luke turned 5 in September, and our baby will be 2, holy crap, in early February. We're spending the holidays with Jane's family in Brazil, while my stepbrother stays with his girlfriend. Things are great, that's all. I'm signing off for now. I'll let you know if anything happens. Happy holidays everyone. Best wishes to all of you. My entitled sister abandoned her 3 children, so I raised them. Years later, they offer me money as a thank you, but she demands it. Hello, I am 48F, and my younger sister, Diana, is 46F. Diana and I never got along well as youngsters. She was always snobbish and unpleasant to me, so we split up as soon as we graduated high school. I elected to continue my education, whilst she preferred to live with her boyfriend at the moment. It was lucky that her lover was wealthy, as our parents could never have afforded the rent for her to live alone. However, she made it abundantly obvious to our parents that she was unconcerned about their opinions on her life and would do whatever she wanted. So my parents never tried to stop her and instead let her go free. Diana had twin girls at 20 and a boy at 21 while living with her lover. My parents were pleased for her, but also anxious because she now had many responsibilities and no work. She was wholly dependent on her boyfriend's money to support her lifestyle. Diana never married her partner, which I believe was a mistake because she would have been entitled to alimony if they split up. They had to part ways after Diana discovered that he had been cheating on her. Thankfully, he provided the child support she was entitled to, but he chose not to be a father and signed away his parental rights. The girls were 3 years old at the time, but my nephew was only 2. After that, my sister was fully on her own and required all of the assistance she could get to maintain herself. Despite our sour relationship, I chose to assist her, primarily owing to pressure from our parents. At the time, I made a respectable living, but it wasn't enough to sustain all 4 of them. However, my parents and I gave a tiny bit of money each month, and they were able to make ends meet. She struggled for the first several months because she lacked a degree and work experience. She had to start at the bottom and work her way up, which forced her to dedicate a significant amount of time to her employment in order to grow rapidly. But this was difficult because she also had to consider her children, and she couldn't simply leave them at home. Hiring a babysitter was a possibility, but it was prohibitively expensive, so she was forced to rely on me or her friends. Our parents were also working and contributing financially to aid her, so they were unable to stay at home with the children. I was in the same predicament. She didn't have any friends who would take on the duty of minding her children while she worked because they all had their own lives and occupations. As a result, she was limited to minimum wage positions that allowed her to work flexible hours and return home quickly. This allowed her to avoid paying the babysitter to stay with her children for an extended period of time, which would have been prohibitively expensive. This condition persisted for a few years, and I believe Diana began to despise her own children because she saw them as hurdles to her success. She said that they were the only things preventing her from moving forward. I would pay her a visit on occasion, not for her sake, but for the sake of the children, to make sure they were doing well. I didn't have a nice connection with her, but I wasn't ruthless enough to let innocent children suffer because of their mother's poor decisions. So my parents and I would check on the kids on a regular basis. They were always complaining about Diana's mistreatment of them. She would chastise them for minor infractions and strike out at them simply for being children and trying to have fun. It was a dreadful existence for all of them, and I hoped I could help them by removing them from that place and keeping them with me, but I couldn't because she was the rightful parent and I had no legal authority over them. Furthermore, she received child support from her ex and was doing her best to make ends meet. I felt awful for her, but even worse for the kids. Diana started seeing other men, which made things considerably worse. Every time a relationship failed, she blamed her children. She was convinced that once her partners discovered she was a mother of 3, they would abandon their relationship with her. I believe it was because she never mentioned her children during the early stages of dating, only bringing it up after a month or 2, which appeared dishonest. I tried several times to explain this to her, but she was convinced that she was being rejected because she had children. She kept teasing them about it, reminding them of how their father had abandoned her and threatening to leave them as well if they didn't behave. The children were scared of her, and their childhood was defined by their mother's narcissism. This continued for years. Several times, I considered taking the kids and fleeing with them, but I couldn't. I could not petition for custody or denounce her because, while her actions were wrong, they did not justify taking the children away from her. So the scenario remained, and the kids were simply grateful to have me in their life. My parents were too elderly to be their pals, but I was always there for them when they needed it. They could never tell their mother about their issues, but they could always go to their aunt, which they did. Whenever they had problems with school, academics, or even Diana, they would come to me, and I appreciated their trust. It's no surprise that when they turned 18, they decided to leave their mother's house and move in with me instead. Now that they were no longer children, they could select where and with whom to live, and they chose me. Diana was clearly dissatisfied and had a lot to say. She stated she had squandered 18 years of her life raising these children, only for them to abandon her in the end. She was really unpleasant about it, telling me that if I had wanted to raise her children so badly, I should have stepped in sooner rather than taking over after the work was basically done. I wanted to tell her that she hadn't actually raised them. They had basically raised themselves because she was usually at work or out on dates with guys who eventually dumped her after discovering she had 3 children. She had no idea what her priorities should be, and it was clear why things turned out as they did. The children selected the person who had genuinely been there for them over the person who had always tortured and reprimanded them since she couldn't find anyone and was miserable in her life. It was evident that she had no idea she was harming them because she was suffering herself. However, I did not want to rub it in her face because I knew it must have been unpleasant for her, which is why she was lashing out at me. So I kept my mouth shut and that was it. After that, we didn't really communicate. Her children opted to leave her and live with me. Diana also chose to cut ties with all of us and cease speaking to anyone, including our parents. This was weird because they had done nothing to deserve it. I believe the fact that they hadn't chosen her side against me when my nieces and nephew opted to live with me irritated her, so she cut them off as well. It's been 7 years, and they're all doing well now. I don't know what Diana has been up to, but I know her children are doing well. My nephew attended medical school and is now a pediatrician. One of my nieces has a degree in literature and is now a teacher, and her twin sister has a hair shop. I assisted all of them in obtaining business loans and financed them to the best of my ability. I'm very proud of them because they've gone a long way from their previous home. They are now living apart. They only stayed with me for 4 years, and even then, it wasn't really like they were living with me because they were generally away at college and only came back on occasion. I believe they didn't want to return to Diana's home, where they didn't feel wanted. It's been 2 years since they all moved out, and I'm very thrilled for them. I never expected anything in return for what I did because I truly believed it was the right thing to do. They were just kids, and no matter how bad things were between me and my sister, I could never be callous to them. I've always had a soft spot for them, especially since I've never had kids or married. It wasn't my cup of tea, but for them, I wanted to be there as a parental figure because their father wasn't around, and, well, we all know who Diana was. They needed someone, and my parents were too old for the position, so I stepped forward. That is all I did. I never anticipated anything in return, but I am grateful that they are the type of children who think I deserve a gift of appreciation for what I done. Even though I don't believe it was something that required compensation, I appreciated their gesture. About a week ago, I celebrated my 48th birthday with my friends and family, including my nieces and nephew. I had a great time, and my nephew was kind enough to organize everything for me. Despite my desire to pay for everything, he insisted on covering the costs because he is now earning enough money to do things for me and display his appreciation. After the party, the three of them sat me down to talk. They told me that now that they were all financially established, they wanted to express their gratitude by collectively writing me a check. I tried to explain that it was unnecessary because I was still working and could support myself, but they insisted. They claimed it wasn't about repaying a debt. They could never repay me for what I had done for them since it wasn't about money. It was about the encouragement and faith I had provided them, which they could never fully repay. This was their humble attempt to show their appreciation. I was deeply moved by their genuine act and wanted to share it on social media. I just wanted to thank them for everything they were doing for me. My sister and I hadn't spoken in years, so I didn't think she would care. I was blocked on every platform, and I assumed she wouldn't see it, so I felt it was fine. Diana had never followed up with us or inquired about her children's well-being after they had left home. Granted, it was they who broke up with her first and moved in with me, but that was her fault. The least she could have done was show interest in their lives and try to be a mother figure to them in order to make one for her faults. But, to be honest, she didn't seem to care about the loss of communication, so I figured she was all right. Anyway, following that post, I received a reply from her a few days ago. I wasn't expecting it because, as I indicated, we hadn't spoken in 6 years. However, I should have predicted that as soon as she realized her children were financially secure, she would start sniffing around like a bloodhound, trying to figure out how much money she could obtain from them. In her reply, she stated that she had seen my post and wanted to talk about her children. She recognized that she had made mistakes in the past and had not been a good mother to kids, but she felt compelled to give herself another shot. She claimed she had missed them a lot over the previous 6 years. I'm not sure how much truth there is in that statement because if she truly missed them, she could have contacted me at least once. She asked me to speak with her children and help bridge the gap between them, as they respond well to me. The timing was strange, so I ignored her message. However, when I failed to react, she called me in the evening, and I snapped. She insisted that I assist her in reconnecting with her children, but I refused. I was quite aware that she was merely pursuing their money, not because she truly cared about their well-being. If she truly regretted what she had done, she would have contacted them directly rather than talking to me. She couldn't let go of her pride and ego for a single second. She still expected her children to contact her, despite the fact that she was the one who had made a mistake. It was amazing how entitled she was. She tried to dispute with me, arguing that she wasn't pursuing their money and that it was offensive for me to suggest so. I assured her that I was not implying anything. It was so obvious. I felt appalled and repulsed by what she was doing. She then accused me of stealing everything from her, claiming that I had already stolen her children and was now stealing her riches. I informed her that I didn't need the money and was originally hesitant to accept the check, but now I was going to take it all because she didn't deserve it. Now she's crying on social media, telling everyone what I said and attempting to make me seem bad. Some of my relatives say I went too far with what I said, that I'm greedy, and that I owe her an apology, which is absurd. That is why I am here to inquire if I'm in the wrong for telling my sister that she does not deserve the money that her children have decided to give me. Update. As some responses advised, I recounted the situation with my nephews and nieces. They informed me they had heard about it from a few of relatives and had considered speaking with me but had not had the time. However, after I called them over and discussed it with them, they informed me that they believed I did the correct thing. My nephew was open about his views, stating that he had never considered of his mother as a maternal figure throughout his life. He always blamed me because she had never been there for him, and my niece agreed. He'd always been the most outspoken of the group, so it was predictable that this was all coming from him. My nieces were too emotional to speak, but he was quite angry and upset. He explained that Diana only spoke to me since she had never done the basic minimum for them. This was despite the fact that she was receiving child support from their father, and even then, she would humiliate them and make them feel horrible for merely existing, which was not their fault. They believe I did the right thing and have informed me that they will not contact their mother, regardless of what happens. They also believe that I should stand up for myself and explain my side of the story online now that Diana has decided to speak negatively about me on social media. They believe that this is the most effective approach to convey the message, therefore that's what I'll do. I'm delighted they opted to take my side in this because my parents are staying out of it and have stated that they don't want to get involved. Diana never spoke to them after her children cut her off, which I find unusual. My parents' polite approach to this problem strikes me as unusual, given that they have not communicated with Diana in the last 6 years. I was disappointed, but at least my nieces and nephew support me. Now many people have asked me why I did not petition for custody and have the children taken away from Diana if I knew she was a bad mother and was mistreating them. I mentioned in my piece that, while her actions were wrong, they did not constitute torture, abuse or neglect. She was constantly harsh to them and wasn't emotionally present for her children. So while I could have filed for custody, it was quite improbable that I would have gotten the children into my care. Courts typically encourage families to keep together, and in this case, they had already lost their father. Their father had abandoned them, leaving them with only their mother as a biological parent. Naturally, the court would want the family to stay together. I knew that if I filed a petition against her or took legal action against Diana, she would ensure that I never saw them again. She would make certain that she took the kids far away from me. It was already improbable that I would have been able to take kids away from her and obtain full custody, so this would have put them in a dangerous situation. This is why I decided to play it safe by staying in touch with them and being available for them at all times. I'm not sure if it was the correct thing to do in the long term, but at the time, it seemed like the only option. Maybe there were other ways to deal with it, but it was all I could think of, so I did what I believed was right. It was difficult for me, and for years I debated whether I should file for custody or have kids taken away from her and rehomed, but there's no telling what might have occurred, and I figured it was better for kids to stay with their mother and maintain touch with me and my parents than risk anything in this circumstance. I hope this answers the questions most people had for me. Maybe I came across as the evil guy for what I did, but I don't care. I know the kids are doing well in their life, and I did everything I could to keep them happy and safe. I was always there for them, therefore I don't feel guilty about anything. Update 2. It's been a week since Diana's message and I've received a lot of phone calls today from family and people who have spoken with her. They were pointing out my mistakes and scolding me. It was getting really tiresome and I was swamped with work, which is why I hadn't been able to post sooner. But today, I decided I'd had enough. After a brief talk with my nephew and nieces, I decided to finally make a post that shared my side of the story as well as, in some ways, theirs. I don't think anyone in the family realized how much those kids had been through as children. How many taunts they had to endure every day simply because Diana opted to become pregnant early and drop everything for her boyfriend at the time. Even after that, she continued to blame others for her own actions and attempted to appear as if she was doing everything in her ability to do the best for her children. But, in actuality, she was never present for them. Since she was telling everyone that I had stolen her children from her and was now stealing a fortune from her, now that her children were doing well financially, I felt people deserved to know the truth, not just her twisted version of events in which she was the victim rather than the person who tormented everyone. They had already judged me for a variety of reasons since they only knew her side of the story and sympathized with her. But in reality, I deserved to share my side of the story, as did her children. So I typed everything up a few hours ago and published the post. So far, she hasn't said anything to me, and the only texts I've gotten are from relatives who were judging me earlier. They have now abruptly changed their tune and are attempting to apologize for judging me too soon. But frankly, it means nothing to me. I simply wanted them to know the truth. I don't care what they think of me, but it was vital for me to speak the truth and share how Diana handled her children, which is why they are no longer in contact with her. Anyway, now that everything is finished, I am ready to move on from this. Honestly, I don't want anything to do with Diana anymore, and I was perfectly content for the past 6 years when she didn't contact me. I believe the same may be stated for her children as well. I don't understand why she felt the need to create so much drama. If she wanted money, she might have asked for it rather than pretending to want another chance at motherhood. Update 3. It's been a day since I wrote that post. Diana may have woken up today and decided to get back at me. Instead of contacting me directly, she became increasingly dramatic and began commenting on that post, attempting to make it appear as if I was lying. But it was not going to work. Obviously, as soon as she attempted to react, her children began commenting and responding to her, reminding her of particular episodes from their childhood in which she had been cruel to them. That lasted about an hour, and I didn't feel awful about it. Nobody else did, because my nephew, nieces and I were all thoroughly enjoying the process. They were utterly humiliating her, and there was no way she could get out of it since every single lie she tried to say to make me look bad was discovered. I'm glad I chose to do this on the weekend. Otherwise, we might not have been able to respond as swiftly. Anyway, that lasted about an hour, and then she began deleting her comments so that no one could catch her in her falsehoods. However, it was too late because many others had already noticed what was going on in the comment section, and I believe she began to be called out for her actions by others. She started erasing her comments and backtracking on everything she said, and then she blocked me. She also blocked her children. I'm guessing it was her way of surrendering, and I'm pleased she did because she would have lost in a fight with us. We clearly have the upper hand here, morally or otherwise. I believed deleting the comments would be the end of our connection, but she chose to contact me personally as well. She messaged me, saying she hoped I was happy now that I had presented her as the monster and everyone hated her. It was very ironic coming from her, because that was exactly what she was attempting to do to me first. She initiated it, and now when I wanted to return it to her, she is unable to accept it. I don't understand why individuals attempt to dish it out when they know they can't take it in return. Just don't cause any drama if you don't want to be held accountable for the results. Anyway, I disregarded that message, and that's what we're all going to do for the rest of our lives because she's no longer worth our attention. She has proven it. My stepbrother insisted that I leave the house during my stepfather's burial, believing it was his. Until the will revealed otherwise. 38-year-old Jake never imagined I would be getting ready for the burial of my stepfather. Memories sweep back like a tidal wave as I sit here organizing old pictures and planning. Death seems to cause one to consider a lifetime of events, both positive and negative. At 9 years old, my mother Sarah married Richard, my stepfather. The wedding day seems to me like yesterday. Mom looked lovely in her basic white outfit, hope beaming in her eyes for a fresh start. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to be stressing his austere attitude by wearing a black suit. Even on what ought to have been a happy occasion, he insisted on a solemn demeanor that I would come to know all too well over the years. Richard was a rigid man right from the beginning. Particularly when he turned to face me, he always seemed to be permanently frowning. Often I questioned whether he simply had the means to relate to a child who wasn't his own or if he harbored resentment at having to assume the position of stepfather. Growing up with Richard was not easy. From my grades to my wardrobe to even how I handled my fork at meals, he attacked everything I did. "You need to work harder, or this cruel world will chew you up and spit you out," he said almost daily. Looking back, I wonder if Dad was attempting to equip me for life in his own flawed manner. Even if at the time I believed he was just being nasty. His rigidity permeated every sphere of our life. I had to sit up straight, use the proper fork, and only spoke when spoken to during family get-togethers. Any departure from his expectations was greeted with a stinging stare or a harsh correction. Family vacations, which ought to have been lighthearted and leisureful, were more like military drills than pleasure excursions. Richard would schedule everything down to the last minute, heaven help us should we stray from the plan. One vacation I recall we missed a turn and arrived at a museum 15 minutes late. For the rest of the day Richard was in a terrible mood, grumbling about lost time and inadequate preparation. Everything changed 3 years following the wedding when my stepbrother Michael was born. Richard suddenly had his own son, and it was obviously clear whose favorite was. He poured love and compliments on Michael. Richard's smile was unlike anything I'd seen till he held his newborn kid. It revealed a part of Richard I never knew existed, like a switch had been turned on. I was envious and furious. When I was 12 years old, I couldn't comprehend why Michael received all the love and attention while I just got harsh looks and criticism. The difference was clear and agonizing. Michael's achievements, no matter little, were honored with great celebration. Even if they were notable, my own successes were greeted with a nod and a remark on how I can improve next time. Mom would try to reassure me when I protested to her about the unfair treatment. "Richard loves you too, Jake," she would say, her eyes begging me to understand. "That's just rough love. He wants you ready for the world." Still, it didn't feel like love to me. It seemed like continual disappointment as Richard saw me always failing. Our family dynamic changed in ways I never would have predicted throughout the years. Mom became ill at 25, and we all gathered around her. Richard stayed stoic even then, but I sensed compassion when he felt nobody else was looking. When Mom thought I wasn't in the room, I would observe him softly changing her pillows or crutching her hand. It was the first time I understood that Richard's lack of affection could have been more a result of his personal constraints than of his sentiments for us. 2 years later Mom passed away, and it felt as though the glue keeping our family intact had broken. Tears and quiet prayers defined the funeral. Richard stood like a monument all through the service, his face a blank mask. Though the wall between us seemed insurmountable, I wanted to get in touch with him to express our loss. Then 21 Michael left soon after Mom passed away. He launched his own family after tying the knot with Emma, his high school sweetheart. It was only me and Richard in that large mansion loaded with memories suddenly. I gave moving out some thought as well, but something held me back. Perhaps it was a feeling of obligation, or perhaps deep down I was still that small boy yearning some indication of approval from the guy who had been my father figure for most of my life. Looking after Richard in his latter years was difficult. Fighting the restrictions his aging body placed on him, he was as tenacious and critical as always. There were days when our conflict was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But occasionally too I felt short sparks of thanks in his eyes. Like the time I stayed up all night with him during a sick attack, or when I learnt to make his preferred foods as he grew too frail to stand at the stove himself. Those were uncommon events though, and most of the time I felt as though I was looking after a stranger who happened to live in my house. We were living in a tense truce, neither of us entirely sure how to close the distance that had widened between us over years. Richard's character made me never even consider entering a relationship or getting married. I wanted none of the same issues I was experiencing from my wife or girlfriend to confront. Richard's gone at 65, taken unexpectedly in the evening from a heart attack. Everyone is showing their respect as I get ready for his burial. Michael arrived with Emma and their children, Lily 5 years old and Max 3 years old. I hadn't seen him in years until now. Though he seems older and more austere, I recall from our early years that he exudes entitlement about everything. The funeral was a depressing event. I stood there listening to people talk about Richard, a fantastic man who always placed family first, a pillar of the community, and I wanted to find fun in the irony of it all. Knowing the same man I did they? To me, the Richard they described seemed to be a stranger. Michael drew me aside as folks were departing once it was all over. I considered that perhaps he wished to assist each other in our sadness, to reconnect, or to share memories of our childhood. Rather, he delivered a startling blow that left me whirling. "So, about the house," he said. His voice laid back as though we were talking about the temperature. "I'll need you to leave by the end of the month." "Not sure," I glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" He groaned and cast an intentionally obtuse glance at me. "Clearly, the house. Dad turned it over to me. Ultimately, I am his genuine son. You never imagined he would leave it to you?" I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. This was how it turned out, all these years of trying to be the son Richard wanted and of looking after him. Part of me wanted to fight for what I felt I had earned over years of conscientious living. But another side of me, the one still feeling like that 9-year-old lad yearning for affirmation, wanted to withdraw. "Fine," I answered, my voice empty. "I'll be out by the end of the month." Not only for Richard, but for the family I never really had, for the bond I had always hoped would grow between Richard and me but never did, as I watched Michael walk away arm around Emma, kids running ahead. That evening I began packing among boxes of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to save. Sorting through years of accumulated belongings, I couldn't help but wonder whether Richard had been right all along. Sometimes you still ended up with nothing to show for it. The world was harsh. Update: I sold out of my childhood house a week ago. For now, Mom's sister Linda is here with me trying to decide what to do next. Thinking about Michael and how we got here, I lie awake at night staring at the foreign ceiling. Michael obviously was the preferred child growing up. Richard doted on him in a way he never did with me from the time he was born. Birthday celebrations with all his friends invited, new toys just because, pleased smiles when he brought home a good report card, all things I had longed for but never received. I recall one birthday Michael was around 8 years old. Richard hired a whole arcade for his buddies and himself. At the time, I was 17 and couldn't help but contrast it with my own birthdays, which often featured a quiet meal and perhaps a small gift. But Michael aged and something changed. The sweet little lad who used to follow me about wanting to play developed into a depressed adolescent who appeared to hate everything and everyone. He started to treat me like I was invisible and spoke angrily back to our parents. It was like seeing a stranger seize my little brother's body. One specific occasion comes to mind when he was around 16. Richard asked us about his marks when we were having dinner. Richard asked us both this kind of inquiry all the time. It was a regular one. Michael burst this time though. He began screaming about how he despised living under Richard's control and how sick he felt of the pressure. He bolted from the house, slamming the door so fiercely a picture fell from the wall. Richard seemed to be sitting there, looking older and sadder than I had ever seen him. Instead of the angry man I had anticipated to pursue Michael and drag back. Michael's behavior just became worse as he grew older. He began courting a series of girls, each relationship ending hazily. Late nights, missing curfews, and shouting battles with Richard that rocked the home abound. I tried to keep out of it, but the continual stress would inevitably affect me. Michael laughed it off when Richard tried to discuss respect and duty. "You can't control me anymore," he would say, and Richard would get this expression, a mix of wrath and despair, that I had never seen before. Then arrived the day he turned up with Emma as his bride. Not even among us knew he was seeing someone seriously, let alone getting ready for marriage. Walking in with Emma, little more than a teenage herself, he said they had eloped. I shall never forget Richard's expression. For once, he was silent. Mom tried to calm things down and welcome Emma into the family, but the air was clearly charged. Richard seemed to be straining to keep his cool and to find the proper words to speak to his kid. Emma claimed she wanted to live free from family meddling, apart. Michael thus packed his luggage and left, simply as that. He pledged to visit and keep in touch, but those pledges soon dropped off the list. Weeks became months devoid of his communication. His calls were always quick and often tinged with conflict. I assumed definitely he would come back when Mom fell ill, but he did not. He asked her periodically how she was doing, but always had a reason for why he couldn't visit. Work was hectic, the kids were sick, the car was in the shop. Something was always there. Hoping it would be Michael, I recall sitting next Mom's hospital bed and seeing her eyes flash every time the phone rang. More usually than not, it wasn't. It was me who had to phone Mom to let her know she died. He sounded very offended, full of regret for not visiting more frequently. He claimed he would try to make it to the funeral, but ultimately he did not show up, just a flower arrangement delivered to the funeral house accompanied by a card offering his sympathies. Feeling his absence like a physical hurt, I stood at the burial wondering how we had become so far apart. And right now here we are. Not motivated by love or obligation, the prodigal son returns for what he can gain. Thinking about how he swooped in and grabbed the house, acting as though he had some right to do so when he had left us years earlier, makes me enraged. I consider all the evenings I spent seeing to Richard, all the doctor's visits I accompanied, all the meals I made, and all the expenses I paid. And for what? To be thrown aside just like I never really mattered at all. But my phone calls as I'm staggered in these terrible ideas. It is Mr. Thompson, Richard's attorney. Telling me he has to talk about something vital, he sounds serious and asks me to come back to the house tomorrow. Uncertain on what to believe. Part of me hopes there's a mistake and maybe I won't have to abandon my house after all. Knowing how let down I have been in the past, another side of me is terrified to hope. I wonder what tomorrow will hold as I hang up the phone. Whatever it is, I am clear one thing. This is not going to be easy. I toss and turn the remainder of the night, my head ablaze with possibilities. Something so crucial that Mr. Thompson had to see me personally. Richard left something for me after all. Is it conceivable? Alternatively, is this only another letdown in a long run of disappointments? Feeling like a stranger, I stood before my childhood house the next day. To my astonishment, Michael's car was also in the driveway already. Breathing deeply, I entered. The familiar creak of the front door sent a pulse through me. Sitting at the dining room table, Mr. Thompson had a stack of documents before him. There were Michael and Emma as well, clearly agitated. With his demeanor unreadable, the attorney motioned for me to sit down. Seated, well aware of the tension in the room. "Thank you all for coming," he said with a firm businesslike voice. "I know this is a tough period, but there are some crucial issues about Richard's will we should talk about." Michael slanted forward, a smug grin on his face. "Let's wrap this up. I would want to start right away as I have plans for this home." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, seeming uncomfortable. "We should really talk about that. Richard's will states that Jake has been left the house and in fact all of his possessions. The room went still for a time. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. Had I heard him precisely? After all these years of believing I was never good enough, Richard had left everything to me. The first to react was Michael. "What?" he yelled, leaping to his feet so fast his chair dropped backwards. "That's not possible. Real son of his father is me. He wouldn't hand everything to Jake." Mr. Thompson stayed cool under Michael's rage. "I'm rather worried it's rather obvious. Richard's will specifically says that Jake is to inherit all of his possessions, including the house, his savings, and his personal items." What I was hearing defied belief. It seemed illogical. Those years of criticism, of feeling as though I could never measure up, and now this. Michael was pacing now, his face flushed with rage. "This is nuts. When he composed this, he must have been insane. I'll dispute it. I'll bring this before court." Mr. Thompson gave a headshake. "That is not what I would counsel. Richard prepared this will rather carefully. He included a letter outlining his choice and had it attested and notarized. Challenging effectively would be quite difficult." Michael turned to face me, his eyes flaming with resentment. "You did this, did not you? You somehow twisted him against me?" Still in disbelief personally, I raised my hands. "About any of this I knew nothing. I assumed he was forwarding everything to you." Before things could get much more heated, Mr. Thompson stepped in. "If I may, I think Richard's letter might help to clarify his choice." Pulling out an envelope, he started to read. To his sons, "Should you be reading this, I am gone. Though I hope I can clarify, I know your two may find my choice shocking. I have made lots of mistakes over my life. Among my largest was not treating both of my sons equally in terms of love. I expected too much from Jake, was too demanding, never showed enough affection. And I treated Michael too kindly. I never set appropriate limits or imparted any lessons of value. As I considered my life in my last years, I came to see something crucial. A real son is defined by behavior rather than blood. And in that sense, Jake behaved as a real son ought to. He stayed with me through trying circumstances and looked after me even when I didn't deserve it. All the traits I attempted to teach but failed to show myself, patience, kindness and responsibility, he exhibited. I am so leaving everything to him, not as a punishment to Michael but rather as a tribute to the kid who really embodied the ideals I cherish. I hope you both have the compassion to see and pardon the errors of an elderly guy." The room went still once Mr. Thompson closed his book. Tears came to me, a lifetime of feelings rising inside me. All those years I felt Richard didn't care, that he considered me a disappointment. But he had been observing, noting, valuing in his own unique sense. Michael froze momentarily, his face a mask of shock and rage. Then he silently seized Emma's hand, rushed out, slammed the door behind him. His automobile started up and ran out of the driveway. The last act of disobedience was a tire screech. Turning to me, Mr. Thompson wore a gentle grin. "I know this is a lot to absorb, Jake," he continued. "Richard expressed his preferences quite precisely. He wished for you a safe future free from financial concerns." I nodded, still not sure I understood exactly what had transpired. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I need some time to consider all this." Mr. Thompson stopped as he neatly folded his documents. "There is still one more item. Your stepfather left you a personal note as well. You read it in private?" he questioned. He gave me an envelope with my name written in Richard's recognizable handwriting on it. I took it knowing that within our words I had waited a lifetime to hear with shaky hands. I sat by myself in the quiet house flipping the envelope in my hands after Mr. Thompson departed. At last I plucked the will to open it and read. "Jake dear, though I know I've never been excellent at communicating my emotions, hopefully this letter will help to offset some of my faults. I'm glad of the man you have evolved into. Though I failed as a parent, I had a challenging upbringing and never taught appropriate affectionate behavior. I reasoned that the best way to equip you for life was to be rigorous and challenge you. I regret the suffering I caused you. Now I understand I was mistaken. Particularly in these last several years, your compassion and commitment have shown me what actual strength and integrity look like. You now more than ever reflect the guy I always dreamed you would be. I apologize for not telling you these things when I was living. With my last wishes and this letter, maybe, you will have some peace and protection. Remember yourself, son. You are deserving of all the joy available. Love, Richard." Tears came down my face as I closed the book. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking Richard didn't care, and now this was overpowering. Over the next days I battled to make sense of everything. Once a cause of stress and bad memories, the house felt different now. It belonged to me, in a deeper sense as much as legally. It was evidence of Richard's affection, sincere if spoken too late. Michael hasn't gotten in touch since he departed that day. Not sure whether he will. Though I know it will take time, part of me hopes we can reconcile someday. The pain is still raw, and our distance seems more than it did years ago. I have given family, the complexity of love and the numerous ways people show it a lot of thought. Though often harsh, Richard's love was sincere. It was flawed. In his own sense, he was working to equip me for life and build my resilience. Though I wish he could have discovered a softer approach, I now better understand him. Regarding inheritance, it goes beyond just money and real estate. One has responsibility. Richard trusted me to continue on his legacy and to live the ideals he loved. Although it's a difficult work, I'm resolved to meet expectations. I have chosen to create a scholarship fund in Richard's name from a portion of the bequest. It's for children from difficult situations so they may have the education and chances they might otherwise miss. Taking the teachings he imparted on me and paying them forward seems like the proper approach to honor his memory. I'm still trying to make sense of everything as I sit here now in the house that turned unexpectedly into mine. Fathers and sons have a complex relationship marked by frequently unsaid feelings and misunderstandings. Richard and I never had the relationship I wanted when he was alive, but his last act has given me an opportunity to better know him, to see the love always there, buried under the surface. I wish Dad had told me these things during his lifetime. We could have had talks, cleared the air, perhaps even created the relationship I so yearned for. But life does not always provide us tidy ends or flawless closure. Right now, I'm concentrating on respecting Richard's memory by practicing the ideals he sought to inculcate in me. Work hard, be conscientious, and most importantly, love those who matter. I'm glad to be carrying on a legacy. Looking ahead, I experience a range of emotions: sadness for what was lost, thankfulness for what I have, and hope for what is to come. Richard's unexpected legacy has given me a fresh perspective of family, love and forgiveness in addition to financial stability. Though I never expected it, this is a new chapter in my life and I am ready to face it, bearing with me the lessons of the past and hope for a better future. That might ultimately be the best inheritance of all. My wife cheated while I grieved my brother's death, blamed me. Then years later, at a wedding, she tried to reconcile, but my new life shocked her. I, 32M, had been with my wife, Teresa, 30F, for 8 years and married for 4. We met at a party hosted by a mutual friend during our sophomore year in college. I was immediately taken to her confident personality and sharp wit. Teresa was studying business, while I was studying engineering. We bonded over our mutual enjoyment of outdoor activities and sampling new foods. Our first date was a disaster. I lost my money and spilled wine on her dress, but Teresa shrugged it off, and we wound up spending hours roaming around campus and talking. I realized she was exceptional right away. Teresa's drive and ambition struck me as our relationship progressed. She hailed from a working-class family and was driven to pursue a good career. I loved how she managed her academics, a part-time job, and internships. Teresa pushed me out of my comfort zone by encouraging me to apply for competitive internships and leadership positions in student organizations. After graduation, we both found nice employment in the city, Teresa with a lighting company, and I at an engineering firm. We moved in together after a year and got engaged soon after. Our wedding was a modest, intimate gathering of close friends and family. Teresa was lovely in her plain white outfit, and I recall feeling like the luckiest man alive. Our first couple years of marriage were great. We both advanced in our careers, which enabled us to travel and enjoy life in the city. We had a wonderful group of friends and frequently hosted dinner parties or game nights at our home. Teresa and I spoke effectively and rarely fought. When we disagreed, we always tried to listen to each other and find a solution. Teresa's independence was one of my favorite aspects of her personality. We both cherished our personal time and hobbies. Teresa enjoyed yoga and painting, while I enjoyed basketball and tinkering with vintage cars. We supported each other's interests and struck a healthy balance between couple and individual activities. Everything changed when Mason, my older brother, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Mason and I had always been quite close. He was not only my brother, he was also my best friend, confidant, and role model. Mason was always there for me growing up. He taught me how to ride a bike, assisted me with my homework, and offered advice on everything from school to relationships. When our parents divorced during my adolescence, Mason became my rock. He was attending college at the time, but he called me every day to check in. He even came home on weekends to see whether I was all right. Mason was the one who encouraged me to apply to college and assisted me with moving into my dorm. At my wedding, his best man speech moved everyone to tears. Happy tears, naturally. Mason's diagnosis hit me like a truck. He had always been the picture of health. He ran marathons, ate properly, and never smoked. It appeared so unjust. I recall sitting in the doctor's office with him and his wife Sarah, feeling as if the world was collapsing on us. Since then, I've spent as much time as possible with Mason. I drove him to his chemotherapy appointments, stayed with him in the hospital, and attempted to lift his spirits. Teresa was initially helpful, accompanying me on visits to Mason and assisting Sarah with food and chores. But as the weeks grew into months, Teresa began to protest. She claimed I was spending too much time with Mason and neglected our relationship. I tried to explain how vital it was for me to be there for my brother, but Teresa appeared to resent the time I was away from her. We began bickering more frequently, generally over my schedule or her feeling neglected. I tried to balance time with Mason and Teresa, but it was really difficult. Mason's condition was fast deteriorating, and I wanted to be as present for him as possible. At the same time, I felt awful about not giving Teresa the attention she craved. It was a no-win scenario. Despite rigorous therapy, Mason died 8 months after being diagnosed. I was absolutely devastated. Mason had been such a constant in my life that I couldn't imagine the world without him. The loss devastated me, and I sank into a profound despair. I took a leave of absence from work and spent the majority of my time at home. Some days, I could hardly get out of bed. Everything reminded me of Mason, TV shows we used to watch together, private jokes we shared, and even particular foods he enjoyed. The grief was intense. Teresa attempted to be helpful at first, but her patience ran out quickly. She kept trying to persuade me to get over it and resume our normal social life. She planned events and invited friends over, but I couldn't bring myself to socialize. Teresa seemed to take it personally and accused me of pushing her away. This carried on for around 3 months. I knew Teresa was having a difficult time, but I was doing my best to cope with this enormous loss. I was attending a bereavement counselor and attempting to process my emotions, but healing takes time. Teresa grew increasingly distant and unpleasant. Then one day, I received a call from Liam, Mason's best buddy since boyhood. Liam had been like another brother to me growing up, and he'd been a huge help after Mason's death. However, this call was different. Liam's voice was uncertain when he informed me he saw Teresa at a motel with another man. I did not want to believe it at first. I absolutely believed Teresa and couldn't picture her cheating, but Liam emailed me a photo he had taken, and there was no disputing it. Teresa was in a passionate embrace with a man I didn't recognize, and they were going to enter a hotel room. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. How could Teresa do this to me, especially because I was grieving for my brother? I sat in stunned silence for hours, staring at the snapshot and attempting to make sense of it. When Teresa arrived home that evening, I confronted her. I showed her the photograph and asked for an explanation. She initially denied it, claiming that it was not what it appeared to be. But when I questioned her, she broke down in tears and admitted to having an affair with a coworker for the past 2 months. Teresa's excuses made me feel awful. She claimed she felt lonely and ignored when I was grieving. She complained that I was not providing her needs and that she deserved happiness. She even had the arrogance to claim that I had pushed her to cheat by being emotionally unavailable. I was infuriated and heartbroken. I told Teresa to leave and that I wanted a divorce. She asked me to rethink and give her another opportunity. She screamed and pleaded, claiming it was a mistake and that she still loved me, but I knew I could never trust her again after this betrayal. The next day, Teresa called and texted me nonstop, attempting to explain herself. She claimed I was being harsh and exaggerating. She claimed that I had emotionally abandoned her by initially spending so much time with Mason and then withdrawing when grieving. She tried to blame me for encouraging her to cheat. I'm at a total loss. How could the lady I loved and trusted for 8 years do this to me, especially when I was grieving for my brother? And now she's attempting to blame me. Is it abnormal for me to refuse to even consider reconciliation? I feel like my entire universe has been broken. I keep revisiting our relationship in my head, wondering if there were any indicators I missed. Was Teresa always so selfish, and I just didn't notice, or did Mason's illness and death transform her? I'm doubting everything now. Part of me is upset with myself for not anticipating this. Perhaps if I had worked harder to balance my time between Mason and Teresa, this would not have occurred. But then I remember that a loving partner would have understood and supported me through such a difficult time. I haven't informed many people about Teresa's affair yet. I'm humiliated and don't want to deal with everyone's responses, but I know I'll need help moving forward, especially if I go through with the divorce. I am not sure what to do next. The prospect of going through a divorce while still grieving Mason is daunting, but I also can't imagine remaining with someone who could betray me like this. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you all for your encouraging words and advice. To clarify a few points, Teresa knew Mason and I were close. She'd met him several times and appeared to like him. She was in the hospital with me when he died. During my grief, I never entirely shut Teresa out. We continued to live together, have meals together and so on. I was just not in the mood to go out or be personal. Before confronting Teresa, I performed some research and discovered that the affair had been going on for 4 months, not 2 as she stated. So it began shortly after Mason died. Teresa and I had no major relationship troubles prior to this. We had regular disputes, but nothing significant. She never expressed feeling ignored until Mason became ill. I appreciate everyone's feedback as I absorb this betrayal. I'll give an update whenever I have more information. Update 1. It's been around 2 months since my original post. A lot has transpired, therefore I'd like to provide an update. I filed for divorce soon after learning Teresa's adultery. It was not an easy decision, but I knew I could never trust her again after what she had done. Teresa's reaction to the divorce petition was a mix of outrage and desperate pleas. She kept calling and messaging me, alternately offering emotional apologies and accusing rants. Teresa showed up unannounced at my office. She made a scene in the lobby, crying and imploring me to give her another chance. My coworkers were uncomfortable, and I was mortified. I had to have security escort her out. After that episode, I banned her phone number for my own sanity. Teresa left our house and moved in with her folks. I've been staying in the house, but it feels empty and filled with sad memories. I'm thinking about selling it and finding a new location, but the prospect of going through another major life upheaval is daunting. I learned from common friends that Teresa was telling everyone that I had mentally abused her by abandoning her emotionally. She stated that I had refused to speak or work on our marriage, forcing her to seek consolation elsewhere. It was infuriating to hear these lies circulated about me. Some of our friends have chosen sides in the divorce. The majority have been supportive of me, although a handful believe Teresa's version of events. I've lost a handful of friendships as a result of this, which hurts even more than everything else. I'm trying to concentrate on the folks who have supported me. The divorce process has been messy. Teresa is claiming that she is entitled to half of everything, including Mason's inheritance. My lawyer assures me that she has no legal claim to it, yet she is delaying the process regardless. It feels like a slap in the face that she would attempt to benefit from my brother's death after betraying me. In the aftermath of everything, I've been dealing with a lot of despair and trust issues. Some days, it's difficult to get out of bed. I lost weight since I rarely eat. My performance at work has diminished, but happily, my supervisor has remained understanding. One positive development. I reunited with an old high school classmate, Olivia. We ran into each other at a coffee shop and started conversing. Olivia lost her mother to cancer a few years ago, so she understood exactly what I was going through with Mason. We've been hanging out as friends, and it's great to have someone who gets it. Olivia and I have a lot in common, something I had forgotten about. We were both on the debate team in high school and enjoy watching old movies. She has been introducing me to new music and podcasts, which has provided a wonderful distraction. Olivia doesn't force me to talk about Teresa or the divorce, but she is an excellent listener when I need to vent. Teresa flipped out when she discovered I was spending time with Olivia. She arrived at my house unexpectedly, yelling that I was a hypocrite for moving on so soon while vilifying her. She accused me of having an affair with Olivia, which is completely false. I had to threaten to call the cops before she left. The situation has been a nightmare, but I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm working on healing and discovering who I am outside of my connection with Teresa. I appreciate my family and friends' support during this trying time. I've been attempting to honor Mason's memory in constructive ways. I donated to the cancer facility where he was treated and have been volunteering whenever I can. Mason's wife, Sarah, and their children have been an excellent source of support. We have dinner together frequently, and it's helpful to talk about Mason with others who care about him as much as I do. There are still times when I miss Teresa and the life we shared, but then I remember her betrayal and how she has acted after I discovered the truth. It helps to emphasize that I'm making the correct decision by terminating the marriage. I'm not ready to consider dating again. The idea of putting myself out there and risking another heartbreak is daunting. For the time being, my primary emphasis is on reconstructing my life and recuperating from everything that has occurred. I will provide another update after the divorce is official. Thank you again to everyone who has expressed kindness and advice. It truly helps to know that I'm not alone in this. Update 2. It has been around 6 months since my last update. I was relieved when the divorce was finally finalized last week. Teresa fought me every step of the way, attempting to prolong the process and collect more money. In the end, We split our joint assets 50-50ths, and she did not receive any of my Mason inheritance. Teresa returned to my office the day after her divorce became final. She was crying and begging me to reconsider, claiming she had made a terrible mistake but still loved me. I politely but firmly informed her that it was finished and requested her to leave. She refused, raising a commotion, and security had to remove her out. It was humiliating, so I took the rest of the day off work. My employer summoned me to his office the next day. I was concerned that he would be disturbed by the disruption, but he was actually very understanding. He mentioned that he had a messy divorce years ago and offered me some time off if I needed it. I was appreciative for his help and understanding. On a good note, Olivia has been doing well. What began as a friendship has gradually grown into something more. We've been officially dating for approximately 2 months now. Olivia is compassionate, sympathetic, and patient with me while I work through my trust difficulties. She encourages me to talk about Mason and never makes me feel awful for continuing to grieve. Olivia and I have been taking it slowly, which I love. We enjoy cooking together, taking long walks, and binge-watching TV shows. She's been assisting me in rediscovering old hobbies that I had abandoned throughout my marriage, such as playing guitar and photography. I've also focused on myself. I joined a gym, began learning guitar, and have traveled extensively. It is fantastic to rediscover who I am as a person. I went on a solo excursion to the mountains, which I had always wanted to do but Teresa was not interested in. It was pleasant to be alone with my thoughts and environment. Teresa continues to disparage me to anyone who will listen. She has told common acquaintances that I'm cold and unfeeling, that I never truly loved her, and that Olivia and I must have had an affair prior to our divorce. It's frustrating, but I'm trying not to get involved in her drama. I have begun spending more time with Mason's family. His children are growing up so quickly, and it's bittersweet to watch them hit milestones that Mason isn't present for. We've developed a ritual of having Sunday dinners together, telling tales about Mason and keeping his memory alive. Mason would have celebrated his birthday last month. It was a difficult day, but Olivia recommended we do something to honor Dad. We ended up organizing a modest charity race in Mason's honor, with funds benefiting cancer research. It felt amazing to turn my grief into something positive. Overall, I'm a lot better off than I was a year ago. I still miss Mason deeply, but the pain is not as intense. I am cautiously optimistic about my future with Olivia and I'm pleased of myself for holding firm and not allowing Teresa to mislead me into reconciling. There are still difficult days, of course. Sometimes I wake up angry at Teresa for abandoning our marriage. Other times, I miss the future we envisioned together. But I'm learning to sit with these emotions without allowing them to overwhelm me. Thank you again to everyone in our community for their support. It helped me get through some difficult times. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm feeling optimistic for the first time in a long time. Update 3. It's been almost a year since my previous update. Life has returned to normal, and I'd want to express my last opinions on the matter. Olivia and I are still together and going strong. We just moved in together and adopted a dog. She's been a tremendous help through everything. I still have moments of insecurity and doubt, but Olivia is always kind and supportive. Our relationship isn't perfect, we've had our share of arguments and challenges, but we always try to talk freely and work through problems together. It's wonderful to be around someone who values honesty and mutual respect. I met Teresa at a mutual friend's wedding a few months ago. It was awkward, but we managed to remain cordial. She apologized again for her behavior during our divorce and stated that she was in therapy, working on herself. I wished her well but made it obvious that I was not interested in rekindling any kind of relationship, including friendship. Seeing Teresa evoked a variety of feelings. Part of me was outraged again, remembering her betrayal and the suffering she caused, but I also felt a sense of closure. Talking to her made me realize how much I'd grown and healed in the last few years. The pain over Mason is coming in waves now. Some days are more difficult than others, particularly around his birthday and the anniversary of his death, but I've discovered healthy methods to cope and celebrate his memory. I volunteer at the hospital where he was treated and have grown close to his wife and children. Mason's oldest son at 14, has been struggling lately. He's been acting out at school and is dealing with rage issues. I've been spending more time with him, taking him to basketball games and simply being there to talk. It feels amazing to be there for him in the same way Mason has always been for me. Olivia and I have discussed our future together. We are not in a rush to marry, but we both see this as a long-term relationship. We've spoken about having kids eventually, something I never imagined I'd desire after what happened with Teresa. It's hard to think of opening my heart again, but Olivia makes me feel protected. Work is going great. I was promoted a few months ago, which has been both exhilarating and challenging. The new work requires more travel, which has been difficult for Olivia and me, but we're figuring out how to balance our time together with our respective activities. I'm attempting to reconnect with past hobbies and interests. I joined a local amateur baseball league, which I enjoyed in college but gave up when life became busy. It's been exciting to get back on the field and meet new people. Olivia attends my sports whenever she can, cheering me on from the stands. Looking back, I see how toxic my relationship with Teresa had been, even before the adultery. We had grown apart, but we were both afraid to accept it. While I will never excuse her affair, I have accepted what happened and am looking ahead. There are still instances when I think, what if? What if Mason didn't get sick? What if I had noticed Teresa moving away sooner? What if I'd done things differently? But I am learning to let go of such thoughts and concentrate on the present. I am not the same person I was when I wrote the first post 2 years ago. The anguish and betrayal transformed me, but not all of the changes were negative. I've learned a lot about myself, resilience, and what I truly want from a spouse and in life. To anyone going through a similar situation, it does get better. Take the time to heal, surround yourself with supporting friends, and don't be scared to start afresh. You deserve happiness and someone who actually appreciates you. This will be my final update on this storyline. Thank you again for your kindness and encouragement over the last few years. It made a huge impact during the worst periods. I am looking forward to the future, whatever it may hold. I had a baby as a result of an affair and now his wife is reaching out to me. I'm so stupid. I, female 26, had an affair with a married man, male 42 a few years ago. I had no clue he was married when we first met and hooked up. I obviously looked him up on social media and while he did have photos of his kids on there was absolutely no mention or photos of a wife at all. I found out that he was married about a month after we first got together, but he told me it was just a marriage on paper and that they basically lived separate lives and agreed to remain married for practical purposes until the kids were older. They owned a business, which she really ran and he was just financially involved in. I knew at the time that I probably shouldn't believe him, but I convinced myself it was true. I was in my early 20s and so attracted to him and I guess almost infatuated with him. He made me feel so good. I know now that I should have ended it immediately, but I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. I was addicted to all of the attention he gave me, the great sex, the places he'd take me. I felt special. I was so naive. I got pregnant about a year into seeing him. I had always been so careful with preventing pregnancy, but during my relationship with him I took stupid risks. I was so high in lust with this guy, it's embarrassing. The things he'd asked me to do, I'd say yes to almost anything, even when I knew it was a bad idea. I was in love with him, or I thought I was. I hadn't intentionally wanted to get pregnant. I would of course dream about being his wife and having a family, but I knew that wouldn't be a possibility while he had this arrangement with his actual wife. I didn't get pregnant on purpose with any intention of him leaving her for me, even if I wished that we could be a real, normal couple. I was surprised by how excited I was to be pregnant with his baby. I wanted that baby once I found out I was pregnant. The thought of carrying this baby of the man I loved was so special to me, but I knew he probably wouldn't feel the same. I told him I was pregnant and he told me I couldn't keep the baby. I expected his reaction, but I was devastated and it hurt me to my core that he didn't feel the same way I did. He offered to pay, to make a whole weekend of it somewhere exciting, what the F, and to buy me something special if I'd just please get rid of the baby. He explained that he didn't want any more kids and that he couldn't openly be a father to another kid when he and his wife were still pretending to be happily married to the outside world. I agreed to do what he wanted and we made plans for him to pick me up and find somewhere out of town to go get it done. I was all packed the night he was going to pick me up, but I started to feel really scared and really unsafe about the whole thing. I took my bag and checked myself into a hotel to hide because I couldn't go with him. I texted him to say I promised to never contact him again and to never name him as the father or go after child support if he'd promised to leave me alone. At first he tried to sweet talk me into doing what he wanted. When I didn't cave in, he said some very nasty things to me and that I essentially better never contact him again or show up at his door. I have a 2-year-old now. At times, it's been difficult, but overall we are thriving as best we can. I have kept my word about not naming him as the father or requesting child support. His wife contacted me on social media. Well, she's his ex-wife now. She wants to talk to me. She found out about me and told me that she divorced him 6 months ago. She wants her children to know their siblings and for my child to know his siblings. That's weird to me. I haven't responded back to her yet. I am unsure about how to approach this. How do I respond to this? I wonder if I'm being selfish by not exploring an option for my child to know his siblings, if she's being genuine about that. If I was married and my husband fathered a child outside of our marriage, I don't think I'd feel the same that she does. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I didn't know he was married when we first got together. I acknowledge that I should have ended the relationship as soon as I found out he was married. I allowed myself to believe what he told me, which made it seem not so bad. Like this was some sort of agreement he and his wife had. Emotionally, I was already hooked. I'm not making excuses. I wouldn't say I was happy to bring a baby into this situation. There was a huge mix of emotions. I felt like I was in love with him, so there was a part of me that was excited at first. That feeling soon died, but I still felt that I loved my baby still. I tried to do the best thing that I could, which was to remove myself from his life and his family's life. I just wanted to be able to keep my baby and love my baby. I did not get pregnant on purpose. I wasn't on birth control. I had been on birth control when I was slightly younger and had life-threatening health complications as a result. He knew I wasn't on birth control. He loved unprotected sex. I was stupid and I agreed to do it. I would do almost anything he asked sexually. I tried to track my cycle and would tell him when it was probably not a safe time to do it. His wife isn't really what I'm afraid of. Whatever she'd want to say to me is probably deserved anyway, and more. Comment 2. He found out about the pregnancy before I ghosted him. And upon finding out I was pregnant with his child, there was absolutely no real discussion about what we were going to do. We were going to do what he wanted to do and he had it all planned out. He threatened me, by text and by phone calls and voicemails, when I told him I was not going to go with him on this abortion vacation he had planned. I begged him to please not force me to do that and he turned mean. I offered to never contact him again if he'd just let me go. After threatening me again, about what he'd do if I didn't keep my word, he agreed. He has kept his side of the bargain and has never contacted me. Comment 3. I've been assuming that she found out about me on her own, maybe saw something on his phone or computer and has probably known for a while before reaching out to me, if it's actually her. I get what some people are saying about siblings and such, but that man is not my child's dad. He is the dad of his older kids, but he's not the dad of my kid. I'm still young and I hope to have more children one day, and those children would be my son's siblings. I hope to find a man who loves me and my son and with whom I can have a legitimate relationship. I haven't been with another man since I ended things with this guy. I actually just went on 2 dates for the first time very recently. I'm not desperate to find a man right now, but I hope to find real love one day. Those people are not my son's family. He's 2 and they're old enough to drive. So I don't think they're missing out on any sort of important relationship right now. I understand wanting to know your bio family, and I feel he can decide that later on when he's old enough to have a day. Depending on where we are in our lives at the time, he might not feel a need to know those people. I don't plan to lie to my son about his conception, but I don't think we need to involve ourselves with the man's ex-wife and teenage children at this time. Update 1. I made a post 3 weeks ago and things have only gotten stranger. I had an affair with a married man a few years ago. I regret it and I will never do anything like that ever again. I knew it was wrong from the very beginning, but he captivated me. I was naive. I allowed myself to believe when he told me they were pretty much just married on paper for the sake of their kids. I got pregnant and while he tried to talk me into getting an abortion, I ultimately decided to keep the baby. I have a 2-year-old little boy now. I promised this man that I wouldn't expose our affair and I wouldn't formally identify him as the father or request child support. I did that because he was becoming very nasty about the whole thing and I felt like due to the mess that I had created and the way I felt by the end of it, a clean break with no involvement with him would be the best thing for everyone. I moved back to where my family is, hundreds of miles from where he and his family live. About a month ago his ex-wife reached out to me via social media, claiming they had been divorced for 6 months and that she wanted our children to be able to know each other. Now their kids are teenagers, so I didn't really think they'd want anything to do with the toddler and the woman their father was having an affair with. It seemed odd to me. After posting here, I sort of decided that I wouldn't respond to her. I'd just ignore it. She just sent me one message, so it wasn't as if she was badgering me about talking to me or meeting me. On Friday night, I decided to message her. I don't really know why. I think it was really just for my sake so I could have the chance to apologize to her. I told her that I would be more comfortable speaking with her face to face since I couldn't trust that it was really her. She said she understood. I was too nervous to meet her in person, but we did a video chat. I didn't know what to expect, if this was all a ploy just to unleash her fury on me or what. I mean, I deserve that. She wouldn't be wrong to feel that way. It was really her. She told me she discovered our affair when she found communications between the two of us, after our relationship had ended. She told me I'm one of many women he had affairs with over the years and she knew about somebody even before he met me, but she didn't divorce him at the time. Finding out about my child was the final straw for her. I told her I was sorry for my relationship with her husband and admitted that I knew he was married. She graciously told me she forgives me and that while she harbored a lot of anger towards me initially, she ultimately blames her husband. I'm not blameless, but she chooses to not hate me, essentially. She said she couldn't have said this 6 months ago or a year ago when she first found out about me, but she has moved past that. She still has anger toward him, in addition to many other emotions surrounding him. She started pouring out her heart to me about their 20-plus year marriage and life together, and it was very awkward because what do I even say? Her kids know about me and my son. She says they're very mad at their father. Somehow I don't think they're mad about the fact that he's not involved with my son's life. And why would they be mad about that? I would hate myself if I were them. I told her that with my son being so little right now, I don't really feel comfortable with him meeting her kids or being involved with their family. I feel unsure about it and it's just not something I feel needs to happen right now. Then she told me her ex-husband was in a bad accident 2 months ago. He's fine now, still not allowed to return to all his normal activities just yet, but will be fine. He is probably the most physically active person I've ever met, barely ever seems to sit down. So he must be terribly annoying to be around if he's not allowed to go all the time. She told me he wants to meet my son. Apparently she moved back in with him temporarily when he first came home from the hospital. She said the accident really shook him up and he has been expressing a lot of regret about my son, not being involved, not providing for him. So now it's like, was everything she said just a lie and he somehow got her to reach out to me on his behalf? And she actually did it? It felt almost like a relief talking to her initially, but then it's like, was any of that true or you were just trying to be his messenger? I don't even know if that part is true now. Why wouldn't he just contact me himself? I'm just feeling so uneasy about the whole thing now. Relevant comments. Comment 1: I don't believe I have to involve his teenage children in my son's life. Maybe when my son is old enough to decide if he wants that. He is not named on the birth certificate and I do not receive child support from him. I have asked nothing of him, except to let me move away and not try to force me to have an abortion. I basically had to promise him to not contact him, not make him as the father, not request child support. If he truly wants involvement with my son, he can reach out to me directly and he can take the legal route to establish himself as our son's father. Comment 2. He did not legally sever his rights. He never established rights in the first place. He has no rights until he goes to court and establishes himself as the father. He is welcome to do that. Honestly, I wish my son did have a father who was involved in his life and loved him. Yes, this guy has faults, but he has plenty of positive qualities. He is really involved with his older children. I met them many times because they'd be at work with him or he'd have to drop by the office on his way to take them somewhere. He was always doing things with them. They seemed like good kids who really loved their dad. I wish my son could have that experience too. I didn't think it was an option based on how he behaved when I was pregnant. He wasn't interested and wanted me and our baby to go away. That's what I did, and I accepted it. Comment 3. He is not legally my son's father at this time. This means that currently he has no legal parental rights or responsibilities regarding my son. I cannot stop him from taking the legal steps to establish paternity if he wishes to do so. He will always be my son's biological father. I can't change that fact. Regardless of whether or not he ever legally establishes paternity, my son will likely be curious about his biological father, and who knows, maybe they will establish a relationship one day regardless of legal paternity. There is no way to say if I will meet a man who may want to adopt my son one day, thus becoming his legal father. It's something that I think would be nice, but nothing that I'm intent on doing. By choice, I've only been on 2 dates since my son was born, and that was only within the year 2024. I realize that it will not be as simple as signing a piece of paper. Update 2. I posted about this a few months ago. To summarize very quickly, when I was fresh out of college I had an affair with a married man and father. I became pregnant. He wanted me to get an abortion. He had arranged to take me away on a vacation, to get an abortion. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I agreed to go along with what we wanted. At the last minute, when he was on his way to come pick me up, I told him I couldn't go through with the abortion. I just really didn't feel comfortable about his plan and how he was orchestrating everything. It scared me. I realized at that time how deep I had gone with this mistake, how screwed up the whole relationship was. He was really mad. He threatened me, said a lot of nasty things to me. I told him if he just left me alone and let me have my baby, then I'd leave him alone and wouldn't name him as the father or seek child support. I moved back home. I was living in a different state when I met him. I kept my word and I didn't name him as the father or seek to establish paternity. I have never sought child support. My child is 2 now. A few months ago his wife contacted me via social media. At first she made it seem like she wanted my child to have the opportunity to know his siblings. It was sort of weird since the siblings are teenagers. She said she had divorced him 6 months prior. I agreed to talk to her virtually, not in person. I felt that I owed it to her to apologize for what I had done. I do feel bad about it. But at the end of the conversation I told her that I didn't feel it was the appropriate time to connect my son with her kids. He's a toddler and in their teens, plus I had promised her husband to stay out of his life. That's when she told me that he was recently in a bad accident and she had been helping to take care of him. Supposedly he was going to be fine and was fairly recovered at that point, but she said he had expressed interest to meet our child. So she was basically his messenger. I have not been in contact with her since then. I deleted my social media. I don't know why, but the whole thing just really made me uncomfortable. Since I last posted here. Then I received a handwritten letter from him. In it, he expressed how he wanted to get to know our son, he wants to be a father to our son, he wants to provide financially for him, he'd like us to come visit him. He asked me to sign a paternity affidavit. I refused to do so. I know he is my son's father, but I'm not going to make this that easy for him. After the things he said to me and threatened me with, he at least has to work for this. At that point, my parents felt that we needed to meet with a lawyer. All communication from me has gone through a lawyer. I have never responded to him personally, directly. Now I have a court order for paternity. I have to present my son to have a specimen taken tomorrow. I already know what it's going to say. It's not that I don't want my son to have a dad in his life. It's just, the whole situation is a mess. And he lives a few states away from me. I don't know what to do. I can't really do anything. He's doing things legally. Next, I'm sure he'll petition for some form of custody or visitation. He's not married anymore, supposedly, but he's a lot more established than I am. He has considerably more financial resources. I also know he has all sorts of connections where he lives. Luckily they don't hold as much weight here in my state, but it's still so scary to me. I'm a bad mom. I brought my son into this world knowing it was a messy situation. I just got so comfortable with it just being the two of us, and now I don't want to give that up. Relevant comments OP on if the father would be moving closer to her and her son now that he's divorced from his ex-wife. OP answer, to touch on just a few things. I don't think he'll move away from where he lives. He has way too much established there. He's in his early 40s. I don't know how this supposed accident, if that even really happened, has affected him, but he was incredibly physically active when I knew him. He only slept like 4 hours a night, took a 20-minute power nap daily, and rarely ever sat down. He was also highly involved in his children's lives. I'd even say overprotective, like a helicopter dad instead of the typical helicopter mom. Careless_welder_4048, how did he have time to cheat? OP answer, he only slept a few hours a night and moved at about 1,000,000 miles a minute. Everyone joked about it. Somehow he always had time to get up at 5 a.m., go surfing, do some work, take his kids to school, do some work, take his power nap, get coffee, pick his kids up after school and take them wakeboarding or some other sort of thing like that, do some more work, be at his kids' basketball game and so on and so forth. He literally never ever stopped. I was just another thing to help fill out his calendar to prevent him from getting bored. OP on the father's relationship with his ex-wife and their children. OP answer. I also don't think he and his wife had much of a relationship, although it wasn't quite as he described it to me. They lived in the same house, but I believe they lived pretty separate lives. He bought her a business to give her something to do and keep her busy. She was there most of the time. They didn't even go to their kids' activities together. He was always the one going. So I think that freed up time too. I don't think they liked being around each other, so she was happy to have him out of the house. She admitted to me that I wasn't the first affair he had, and she knew about most of the time we were together. Another update on how stupid I am, or I had a baby as a result of an affair and now his wife is reaching out to me. I won't rehash the whole thing here. My previous posts are on my profile. I got pregnant from an affair with a married guy. He wanted me to have an abortion. I decided I didn't want one. He turned mean. I promised to not name him as the father, legally, or to pursue any sort of child support. I moved away from where he and his family were located. I'm about 12 hours away from him now, back where my family is from. I haven't reached out to him in over 3 years since. His ex-wife reached out to me out of the blue via social media, initially claiming she wanted to connect with me so that our kids could know each other. When I politely declined for the time being, as her kids are teenagers and my son is a toddler and we live states apart, she revealed she was really reaching out on behalf of her ex-husband who had supposedly had a change of heart about being involved in our child's life after nearly dying in an accident. I did not engage with her any further after that. It all made me feel very uncomfortable. Later, I received a letter from him in the mail. He asked to be involved with our son, to provide for him, etc. It still felt weird. I mean, he turned really mean and didn't want anything to do with me or our baby and hadn't made any attempt to contact me in years, and I was not hiding. His wife was obviously able to find me on social media and you can find my address online. I felt like if he was serious, he'd take the steps to establish paternity legally. And that's what he did. Around 1.5 months ago we were ordered to submit DNA samples for a paternity test. It took around 5 weeks to find out what I already knew it'd say. But now things are stalled for another several weeks for the next step in the court process. I haven't talked to him at all during this whole thing. I didn't respond directly to his letter. I do have a lawyer and everything is basically going through him now. Then without any warning, he just showed up at my home last weekend. Just knocked on the door like it was nothing. Basically, this is his son and he doesn't want to wait another 6 weeks for the court to inevitably order us into some sort of custody mediation anyway. His words: "Why can't I just talk to him?" I told him he made me uncomfortable and him just showing up at my house really made me uncomfortable. Honestly, I don't know what made me so uncomfortable. The fact that he showed up unannounced like that, or the fact that I instantly felt the same attraction to him that I had when I was with him and I didn't want to feel that at all. In some weird way part of me felt happy to see him and then another part of me was disgusted that I was happy. He said he doesn't understand why we can't just talk about this. He's not trying to take my son away from me. He just wants to be involved in his life and to help provide for him like he should have been all along. He's sorry he wasn't there when he was born. He's sorry he reacted the way that he did when I didn't go along with his plans to take me on an abortion vacation. Why can't I believe that he just wants to be a dad to his kid? I guess I agree with him. Why can't I just accept that he has had a change of heart? I can't trust myself. I can't trust my own judgment. I feel like if I easily let him into my son's life I'm going to end up regretting it and be made a fool of somehow. I've already made so many mistakes when it comes to him. He says it's stupid of me to not try to work it out amongst ourselves first. I'm giving so much control to the court. I don't know whether to believe that or to think it's just his way of convincing me to do what he wants. I know he will get some sort of visitation and eventual custody. Maybe it would be better if we try to come to an agreement, but he had the ability to sway me so easily. I'm so stupid when it comes to him. Nobody else has ever made me feel so foolish in my life. I want my son to have a dad. I admit it's probably selfish of me to want to keep him away. I just keep imagining having to spend weeks or months apart from my child while he's living with his dad 12 hours away and I can't stand the thought of it. I'm just feeling sad, stupid, and defeated. Relevant comments OP on if the father is actually divorced from his wife. OP answer: I checked the county records and they did actually get divorced. Mammoth_Mite 8171. At this point you need to trust your lawyer. Hopefully he is a good one. Make sure that your lawyer has all the facts, including how poorly he treated you when he found out you were pregnant. Do not communicate any more with your ex, especially since you know that you're incapable of making good decisions when he is involved. You may need to prepare yourself mentally that your ex is eventually going to play a role in your kid's life, as much as that sucks. Hopefully you can go after him for back child support. OP answer: my lawyer has any and all information that I possibly had to share. I am already preparing myself that he will likely have a role in my child's life. I mean, the change will be difficult for me and I honestly don't want anything to change. But I'm trying to focus on any shred of positive outcome this could have for my son. He deserves a dad. I wish it wasn't in this situation. I wish I had given him 2 loving parents in a stable relationship, the ideal. I wish I had at least given him a father who didn't live states away. I feel bad that my son has 2 lying cheaters for parents. I truly do feel so embarrassed about our behavior in a new way I did before, ever since my son was born. Other than that whole thing and the fact that he's apparently had affairs with multiple women according to his ex-wife, he actually seems like a good dad to his teenage kids. He was always very involved with them. I guess I'm just trying to cling to whatever positive things I can think of. He can also provide a lot more financially than I currently can. That's scary for me because I'm already turning it into some sort of competition between us in my head. Several points for him, none for me. Plus my son is also very shy. He doesn't do well if me or one of my parents isn't there with him. I'm just now getting him involved in more activities with other kids and safe, trusted adults, but he still just clings to me. My heart breaks when I think of him meeting a strange man he doesn't know and me not being there. I want to be there. Plus I think that's how things normally go for him, and to be perfectly honest, that's how I used to be for him too. Just go along with what he wants. He was obviously expecting me when he showed up in person. He genuinely seemed surprised I didn't cave into his request right on the spot. The previous version of me probably would have. OP on how the father managed to find her address. OP answer. He sent me a letter in the mail previously. I googled myself and my address came up easily. Admittedly, I made no effort to hide myself after moving away. I didn't think I needed to. He had no interest in being involved with our baby and I promised to never contact him again. So I thought that was the end of it. His ex-wife told me he was in a bad accident when I talked to her. It's not too surprising based on his hobbies. He lives at like 200 miles per minute. According to her, she had to move back into their house to take care of him while he recovered. When he showed up here, he didn't look like somebody who had been in a life-threatening accident not too terribly long ago. He told me he's fully recovered and although he'll probably have back issues the rest of his life, he's perfectly fine. OP on having a visitation plan with the father for her son. OP answer. My lawyer says that other than creating a graduated visitation plan based on the fact that my son doesn't know this man, the fact that he hasn't been involved in his child's life for the last 3 years won't mean much to the court. Their ultimate goal is for a child to have 2 parents. I screwed myself over by not naming him as the father at birth or trying to establish paternity in any way. Had I done that and he fought it, neglected to pay court-ordered child support, etc., then we could have a better case as far as abandonment goes. He is putting in the effort to establish paternity now, is willing to pay child support, so he says, and is presumably going to tell the court he wants to see his kid, and this is going to reflect positively for him, despite not being involved for 3 years. New update. Since everyone got mad at me for posting a recap of my situation in my previous posts, I won't even go there. If you're interested in the backstory, you can read my previous posts. All I will say is that I have a 3-year-old son who was conceived in an affair I had with a married man. After initially making me promise to not contact him, to not name him as the father, and to not request child support, my child's father has been pursuing involvement in our son's life over the last several months. He lives states away and most recently he showed up at my house to try to convince me to work things out directly with him. Since the last time I posted, we've recently had a mediation session and he's met our son twice. At this time, he will have supervised visitation, with me present. Because he lives states away, he is required to come here to see our son. It will not be on a weekly basis due to the travel. He will see him during 2 weeks of the month, 2 times each week, for a total of 4 visits a month plus 2 video calls a month. This will last for 6 months. The next step will be for him to continue that schedule, but to have unsupervised visitation during which he cannot remove him from the area, for another 6 months. After a year, we agreed to have another mediation session to determine next steps, with the goal, his goal, of being able to have my son at his home for short overnights. I'm not even ready to discuss that. He's already suggesting I can come for the first few times. I don't like the sound of it at all. We also have the option to request another mediation before 1 year and something tells me he's going to pull that. I also have an order for child support. While he is in agreement with paying child support, it will have to work through the court system before becoming official and for me to start getting the regular payment. He wrote me a large check in the meantime. I was hesitant to accept it. Not that I don't think my son deserves it, but now I'm just always worried I'll say or do the wrong thing legally, completely unknowingly, and shoot myself in the foot. Like, am I obligating myself and my son to anything by accepting this check? Can he somehow spin this against me? Of course he was not in favor of the 6-month plan, and while he does understand that my son should not just go off with a stranger upon first meeting him, he wishes we could speed it along a little more, but 6 months was what we were able to agree on. He wanted to fly us both to where he lived so he could spend a week or 2 getting to know our son, but I don't feel that's appropriate at this time. Perhaps in a few months, or around the holidays, depending on how things are going. It would be too much too soon. The initial 2 meetings went pretty much just as I thought they would. My son is extremely shy. He wanted to hide behind me most of the time. Then when he would venture out from behind me, as soon as his dad would say anything to him, he would scurry back behind me and just stare at his dad blankly without saying anything. He came out of his shell a little bit, however he has still not said a single word to his dad. He just pretends like his dad isn't there and only talks to me. I will say that his dad is being patient and understanding as far as that goes. If he's frustrated, he's not showing it. He did suggest that maybe our son needs to get out more, go to daycare more of even preschool instead of spending so much time with me and my parents. He's very delighted with how much our son looks like him and how much he favors him over me. The one thing that did bother me is that I already told him I wanted to be very careful and mindful of how we informed our son, this little barely 3-year-old boy, that this man complete stranger is his dad. He said sure, yeah. Then at the first meeting he introduced himself as dad. Since then I've been trying to help my son understand. Like, you know how your grandpa is my daddy, this guy is your daddy. It's so surreal to me that any of this is happening. I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for something to blow up in my face. Now it's just working on accepting our new reality. All of this change is hard and confusing for my son, and it's hard for me. Unless he really fucks up, I'm looking at eventually shared times with my son, spending school breaks and holidays at his dad's house, hours and hours away in another state. It won't happen tomorrow, but it will happen in the most likely reality. I just hope he stays committed. If he can be a good dad to my child, then my child deserves that, no matter how sad sharing him makes me. If he breaks my son's heart, that'll be another story, and I won't accept that so readily. Relevant comments. OP on the times when her son has to go visit his father and what the courts are deciding on. OP answer, they haven't ordered him to visit his father in his state, but eventually, that will probably happen. Talking elementary school age. Worldly Promise 675. I hope it all works out as well as it can given the circumstances. Your son and his well-being is definitely top priority. The baby daddy seems really pushy and doesn't like boundaries, so it does not seem he's changed much. OP answer, he's used to getting his way. I'm doing my best to not just roll over but also learn to compromise. Imalela, are you concerned that he may also try to push the idea of reconciling romantically? It sounds like you are focused on your son and he's focused on getting his way. OP answer, I don't know. He hasn't really given me that impression. He's given me compliments. He's tried reminding me of some of the good times we had together. But I see that as all part of his schmoozing to just get me to do what he wants, not to get back together with me. OP on getting a therapist for her son. OP answer, yes, I'm working on finding a therapist for him. I realize I should have started that process before this all went into action.